Chapter 503. Xiaoqing's intuition told her that something was wrong. Her intuition was very accurate. She had escaped from danger many times by relying on her intuition. As soon as she saw the zombie, she couldn't help but frown. She felt that something was wrong. She whispered to Qin Zishi, "I feel that something is wrong." "What's wrong?" Qin Zishi didn't find anything wrong, so she frowned and looked hard. However, no matter how hard she looked, it was just an ordinary level 4 zombie. She could tell from its reaction when it was attacked. "I don't know what to say." Xiaoqing gritted her teeth, then said, "Trust me, just tell everyone to be more vigilant." Before she finished speaking, there was a change in the scene. Suddenly, a black bug came out from behind the zombie that was struggling for its life. The bug was very small, so it couldn't be seen clearly at ordinary times. But what if it became a dense swarm? In a few seconds, the whole zombie was covered with bugs. Then, they gave up on the zombie and quickly crawled around. An Earth paranormal who was closer to the zombie quickly put up an Earth shield. He reacted very quickly, but he still screamed. The swarm of bugs crawled on his body in an instant. The Earth shield didn't work at all. It couldn't even stop them. He screamed and ran towards his companions. After running a few steps, he stopped. Then, the crows and the bugs scattered on their own. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Bones scattered all over the ground. The bones had been gnawed clean. The color was still red, but there was not even a trace of meat on them. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but step back in fear. However, the bugs were very fast. Some people couldn't help but throw things like fireballs and wind blades at the bugs. Then, they were horrified to find that the fireballs and the like disappeared quickly after they were thrown into the swarm. Then, those bugs seemed to be a little bigger, they could devour superpowers. "Everyone, step back." Xiaoqing quickly stepped forward. Vines rose from the ground and turned into a wall of vines, then stopped the bugs. This was only temporary because Xiaoqing could feel that they were gnawing at the vines, and they were gnawing at them at a fast speed. Everyone couldn't help but start retreating. Qin Zishi hurriedly stepped forward to stop them. Xiaoqing called Yan Qiue over. "You try." Yan Qiue nodded and used his skill. Then, his expression changed. "This won't do. Their shells are very hard. I can't crush them." Xiaoqing did not panic. She took out a dagger, and then used the vines to grab a bug from the swarm. She slashed down with the dagger, and with a ding, it was unscathed. The black bug had a pointy head and extremely sharp teeth. Its body was covered with a black shell that was extremely hard. There were also faint lines on the shell that could not be seen. Xiaoqing took advantage of the fact that the wall of vines had not been eaten and called a few people over. She tried all kinds of methods and finally found that these things could indeed devour supernatural abilities. Whether it was supernatural abilities or sharp blades, they had no effect on them. Then, Xiaoqing unexpectedly found a white spot on the worm's stomach. She quietly stretched out her fingernail and poked it into the worm's stomach. She found its weakness, but fucking turn them over one by one and poke their navel. Not to mention that there were so many of them, just poking them was tiring. Xiaoqing was a little desperate. She originally wanted to throw away the worm's corpse, but in the end, she found a glass bottle and put it in. Find someone to send it back to the capital and study it. Chapter 504. Qin Zishi nodded. She found a speed paranormal and a few people to protect him and send him back to Jingdu. My intuition tells me that this is another disaster. Xiaoqing said expressionlessly, the only weakness we have found so far is that there is a soft white spot on its stomach. We haven't found anything else, but we can't turn them over one by one and poke their stomachs. The second point is that they are not interested in zombies. They probably use zombies as boats. Xiaoqing pointed at the 4th-level zombies that were still alive. These insects were hidden in the bodies of zombies and smuggled over. She was now very curious about what happened in Country M that caused these black insects to smuggle into the country. After adding another layer of vine wall to encircle the insects, Xiaoqing said, "We can't go on like this. They keep eating my vines and keep growing." Her vines also contained elements of supernatural power. Everyone looked at each other. These insects came in a strange way. Fortunately, their individual attack power was not strong. Even so, they could not be killed or trapped, which was very troublesome. They could not just trap them like this and kill them one by one, right? They are reproducing. Someone screamed. Xiaoqing frowned and looked at them. Then she found that these insects, after reaching a certain size, would not grow. Then, they would excrete white eggs and hang on the vines. Soon, small insects would break out of their shells. The small insects would eat, and soon they would grow bigger and give birth to eggs immediately. Xiaoqing felt itchy all over in an instant, and her hair stood on end. Their hard shells could not be killed. They could devour supernatural power to strengthen themselves and reproduce so quickly. What were their shortcomings? There could not be a perfect race. Now, the idea of killing them one by one was also destroyed. Killing them would not be as fast as they grew. Xiaoqing could predict that if they left alive, they would quickly occupy the country and reproduce endlessly. Finally, the extinction of human beings. This future was too scary. Even if zombies could not be attacked, so what? What was the point of the world when there were only zombies left? Xiaoqing looked very serious. She killed a few more insects and handed them to Yan Qiue. "I'll leave them to you." Yan Qiue nodded and asked the people around him, "Is there a quiet place?" Immediately, someone led him away. Before Yan Qiue could figure out how to contain the insects, they could only slowly think of a way. A group of people squatted behind the wall of vines and began to use their own methods to deal with those insects. Xiaoqing also tried one after another. Qiu Tang's poison was useless, Guangguang's poison was useless. She suddenly had a thought. Where was the daughter? Therefore, she threw out the daughter seed. The daughter seed was too small, so when it was attached to the insect, it would not be discovered at all. But, the seeds couldn't enter the insect's body, unless they entered through the insect's mouth. But even the seeds of daughter would be eaten. She was very helpless. After trying everything once, she released her man-eating flower and sighed, "Big flower, this is your little sister little flower." The man-eating flower could not understand. It only saw food. After being released, it stretched out its flower head without saying anything. The petals closed and swallowed a bunch of insects. Xiaoqing quickly patted the big flower. "Baby, spit it out. This thing can't be eaten. They might even eat you." The big flower shook its flower head. It was originally a tyrant. How could it spit out the meat in its mouth? Chapter 505. Xiaoqing could only pull off the flower's head and petal. Then, she saw that the bugs were lying in the flower's stomach acid. Only some bug legs and bug shells were left. The flower shook off its head and spat out a bunch of bug shells that it couldn't digest. Then, it happily stretched out its head and ate a bunch of bugs into its stomach, shaking its head in satisfaction. It hadn't eaten its fill for a long time. Because it couldn't keep up with Xiaoqing's pace, the flower hadn't been released for a long time. Although the nostalgic Xiaoqing couldn't bear to replace it, she rarely used it. Unexpectedly, the flower, which didn't have any taboos when eating, had its uses. No wonder it was said that everything had its weakness. Xiaoqing found a bottle and said to the flower, "Spit out some saliva, or I won't let you eat. After you spit it out, you can eat whatever you want." The flower was using its leaves to cover its head and shook its head desperately. After hearing the second half of the sentence, it decisively opened its petals and spat out some transparent liquid. Then, the bottle Xiaoqing took out was corroded. The liquid was very corrosive. The glass bottle couldn't withstand it at all. Seeing that the bottle was corroded, the flower covered its head and shook its petals as if it was laughing. Then, Xiaoqing pulled off a petal and rolled it out into a cup to collect the liquid. The flower was speechless. Its master was so cruel. Fortunately, as long as it had Xiaoqing's power, its petals could grow again. Therefore, the flower didn't feel particularly distressed. It just had a headache. After collecting some liquid, Xiaoqing asked someone to send it to Yanqiue. Then, she found a place to sit down and watched the flower eat. The flower showed its cruel side. No matter how much it ate, it couldn't be full. The black bugs reproduced quickly, but it was still slower than the flower's eating speed. If it were any other time, the flower would have been eaten by a group of black bugs alone. But with Xiaoqing watching, the black bugs couldn't attack the flower and could only be eaten by the flower as snacks. Although the speed at which the big flower ate the black insects was faster than the speed at which it reproduced, it was not much faster. It could only be said that the number of black insects was slowly decreasing. Even so, it was enough to surprise the surrounding people. They cheered as if they had been saved. Xiaoqing, on the other hand, was not as optimistic. She said to Qin Zishi, "I suspect that there are already zombies carrying black bugs that have entered the mainland before this." "I don't think so. These black bugs reproduce very quickly. If there were really zombies carrying them into the inland, they should have exploded by now." Xiaoqing always felt that the crisis would not be solved so easily. She touched the flower's leaves and encouraged it to continue eating. She said, "If there's a chance, it's best to go to Country M and see what's going on there. There are zombies and black bugs that have been smuggled in. Who knows, there might be other things." Qin Zishi rested her chin on her hand and said, "The people in Jingdu are ready to go to Country M. Firstly, they want to investigate the situation there, especially in terms of strength. Secondly, many overseas Chinese have contacted Jingdu several times, wanting to return home. However, because of the zombie siege and the things on the coast, they don't have enough people, so this matter has been delayed." Xiaoqing nodded. Originally, she wanted to say that if the people in the capital wanted to go, they could bring her along. Later, she realized that things were different now. With her current status, no one would dare to bring her along. Qin Zishi seemed to have seen through Xiaoqing's thoughts. He whispered, "My grandfather sent people to organize it. If you want to go, we can bring you along. We'll talk about it when the time comes." Xiaoqing did not want to say too much. She didn't know what would happen when the time came. She fiddled with the flower's leaves and said, "I'm not in the country these days. Is there any fresh news?" Anyway, she was waiting for news from Yanqiue. Instead of sitting idly, she might as well chat. "A few days ago, I heard that a base has developed suppressants. If ordinary people are bitten by zombies, they can be injected with suppressants and return to normal." Qin Zishi held his chin and said, "It's just a rumor. I don't know whether they have developed it or not. The research institute in the capital is also useless. After the incident with you last time, the senior management in the research institute has changed. Now they are also researching suppressants, but there are no results yet." Xiaoqing nodded. If they could really develop suppressants, it would be a good thing. She didn't know whether the suppressants would be effective on infected people, like her and Air Dai. However, she felt that suppressants might not only bring good fortune, but also disaster, especially when the suppressants were not in the hands of the government. While she was chatting with Qin Zishi, Yan Qiue had quickly found the most important thing. This was also thanks to the flower. Chapter 506. It was said that everything had a weakness, and this saying was indeed true. The big flower was actually the nemesis of this group of black insects. These insects should be a type of mutated animal. Yan Qiue found that they were very similar to zombies. When they were dissected, they looked like a mass of dead meat. The so-called reproduction was actually a kind of division. The absorbed energy was converted into a part of the body, and when the limit was reached, it would split and become its own kind. This was a kind of strange zombie insect, so they were not interested in zombies. Their shells were made of a very special material. The degree of hardness was a little scary. The liquid secreted by the big flower was highly corrosive. Although the shell was invulnerable, it was afraid of the corrosive liquid of the big flower. But the problem was that there was a difference between the big flower and the ordinary man-eating flowers. The big flower evolved with Shaoqing, which meant that it was now a level 6 mutant plant. After reaching level 6, the most remarkable feature of the big flower was that the liquid secreted by it was much more corrosive than the ordinary man-eating flowers. So, could the ordinary man-eating flowers digest these black insects? Yan Qiue was not sure, because he did not have the materials at hand. The things he could use were limited. He just used the liquid secreted by the big flower to make a simple medicine. The name of the medicine was corrosive medicine, and then he took it to experiment. After the medicine was poured into the insects that touched it were corroded. Suddenly, a large area was emptied. It is effective. Yan Qiue was surprised. Give me some more time, and I can turn the medicine into a spray. Then, the people patrolling the sea will carry a bottle with them. If they find any black insects, they can kill them. Shaoqing nodded, and then said to the person in charge, "Please send your men to look for man-eating flowers nearby. See if the corrosive liquid of ordinary man-eating flowers has any effect on these insects." The person in charge nodded quickly and sent people out to look for them. Shaoqing threatened the big flower and spat out more liquid. She asked Yan Qiue to do the research. The big flower felt wronged, but it was soon comforted with so many insects to eat. After the insects were killed by the big flower, it had some indigestion. After all, although the insects were small, they carried a lot of energy. After eating them, it needed to digest. The plan to use Dehua to eliminate the insects was naturally announced to be a failure. After Dehua ate a group of insects, it took an entire night to digest them. It also grew an extra leaf, under which thin vines grew. In the past, it stood in the same place, waiting for prey to come to its door. Later, it was requisitioned by Shaoqing, and it could jump around and chase people. Now, it could stretch out its vines, tie up the prey, and put it into its mouth. It was really worth celebrating. Because of the big flower kept providing corrosive liquid. Of the team that went out to look for man-eating flowers also came back. They found several man-eating flowers, but unfortunately, their level was not high. The highest level was only level 3. The corrosive liquid had no effect at all. In the past 2 days, the big flower was put outside in a free-range mode. It also secretly ate one of its own kind. When it burped, it was found by Shaoqing, and several petals fell off. The big leaf hugged its flower head and hid in the corner for a long time. Yan Qiue regretfully said that at least the corrosive liquid produced by man-eating flowers above level 5 could have an effect. Of course, the most effective one was the big flower. It was probably the highest level among the man-eating flowers now. Chapter 507. After the results were out, Xiaoqing thought for a long time and finally said, Zishi, bring some people and stay here to guard against those black bugs. Chiyue and I will go to the forest to see if there are any high-level man-eating flowers. Relying on the flowers alone was not feasible. They needed more corrosive liquid to make the spray. The flowers would not be able to produce that much even if they were exhausted. Qin Zishi knew that Xiaoqing was a zombie. She would be the safest in the forest, so he nodded. However, he could not help but remind her, you must be careful and come back early. He always felt that he was like a husband whose wife reminded him to go on a long journey. I know. Xiaoqing patted his head and said, I will leave tomorrow morning. Chiyue will make some more spray tonight. You guys can use it to protect yourselves. Actually, even if it was not for this matter, she would still go to the forest. She had been to a small forest once. This time, she wanted to go to the largest forest in the Celestial Empire. Moreover, she wanted to go to the deepest part of the forest. Anyway, after she broke through to level 6, she still needed a mutated plant. This time, she could also settle this matter. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The next morning, they left, leaving behind the spray that Yan Chiyue had rushed to make overnight. Because of this, the flowers drooped their heads and leaves, looking pitiful. Yan Chiyue only slept for 2 hours at night. She kept yawning and looked very pitiful. After Xiaoqing left with them, she went nearby and caught a mutated tiger so that Yan Chiyue could sleep on its back for a while. Ye was very proud. She squatted on the tiger's head and jumped around. The tiger did not dare to complain. It was already scared by Xiaoqing. Ye was probably the first rabbit that dared to behave atrociously on the tiger's head. The largest forest was in the southernmost part of the Celestial Empire. There, it rained for 10 out of 12 months. Sometimes it was a downpour, and sometimes it was a continuous drizzle. Because of the overly humid weather, the forest there was exceptionally lush. When Xiaoqing and Dai arrived at the place, it was rare that it wasn't raining. The sky was clear, although it was cloudy and they couldn't see clearly. After a short rest, Xiaoqing let go of the tiger. She held the soft little fish and led the other animals at home into the jungle. She didn't dare to enter the forest for the first time with her strength. Now that she was at level 6, she didn't dare to say that she was the best in the world, but she could be considered one of the top few people. There were no weaklings around him, so he was exceptionally confident. Their days in the jungle were as comfortable as their own home. When they were hungry, there were ingredients all around them. They could eat whatever they wanted. It was very fresh. There were vegetables and meat. Xiaoqing even wanted to move the entire river town here. When we are free, we can come here and transplant some trees to the back of Rivertown. Then, we can catch some of these wild vegetables, mushrooms, and animals and rear them in captivity. When Xiaoqing said that, she felt that she was about to salivate. The happiest thing in the world was to have an ingredient warehouse at your doorstep. You could eat whatever you wanted. It was all fresh. The corner of Yan Chiyue's mouth twitched. Then, she said, as long as you are happy. The moment they entered the jungle, they met with a disaster. Usually, no one dared to enter this jungle because it was too dangerous. Even the periphery of the jungle was full of danger. There were simply not many people who dared to come to their deaths. Therefore, the plants and mutated animals in the jungle lived very freely. They acted like tyrants and no one dared to provoke them. But Xiaoqing came and even brought a family over. The entire jungle was in a mess. The originally arrogant mutated animals now ran away when they saw Xiaoqing. Because if they ran too slowly, they would become a plate of barbecue or a pot of pork ribs. Even the uglier animals, such as snakes, insects, rats, and ants, couldn't escape from Xiaoqing's kitchen knife. There was nothing that they didn't dare to eat. There were only things that they hadn't encountered yet. To the group of mutated animals, Xiaoqing and the rest were simply too terrifying. Not only the mutated animals, but also the mutated plants. They were also killed by Xiaoqing and the rest. To others, this was the jungle of death. To Xiaoqing, this was the jungle on the tip of the tongue. Those ferocious beasts were terrifying and fatal in the eyes of outsiders. But when Xiaoqing saw them, they would only be divided into two types. Those with tender meat would be roasted and fried. Those with old meat would be stewed and boiled. None of those poisonous creatures were able to escape the calamity. In terms of the horror of a foodie, Xiaoqing led Air Dai and the rest into the depths of the jungle. At first, they encountered many mutated beasts. When some saw them, they bared their teeth and rushed up with saliva. Later, as long as they heard the movement, they would swarm away, only leaving Xiaoqing and the rest to see a trail of dust. Yan Qiyu began to doubt later. Were they really not in a zoo? Were they really not facing a small animal that had been domesticated to be very docile? She couldn't feel the horror of the jungle of death at all. She could only feel the delicious taste of the jungle equals the barbecue yesterday was so good. Yan Qiyu was completely assimilated by the foodie. We are about to enter the inner area. Xiaoqing, who was originally very relaxed, also became vigilant. She was relaxed before for a reason. The outer area of the jungle was actually not dangerous, at least for them. But once they entered the inner area, Xiaoqing couldn't guarantee 100% safety. Along the way, they found many man-eating flowers. Unfortunately, these man-eating flowers were not of a high level. Xiaoqing didn't even want to collect the corrosive liquid. Everyone, be careful. Xiaoqing said very seriously. When Yan Qiyu and the rest heard Xiaoqing's words, they became more vigilant. Especially Air Dai, he listened to Xiaoqing the most. His ears were pricked up, trying to hear the nearby sounds. He could distinguish where was dangerous and where was safe so that he could protect Xiaoqing well. They walked towards places suitable for the growth of man-eating flowers, trying to find a higher level of man-eating flowers. Then, they would collect some corrosive liquid and let the big flower swallow some. Swallowing its own kind could make the big flower grow faster and feed back to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing would also benefit a lot. It could be said that it was killing two birds with one stone. But since they entered the inner area, they hadn't encountered any living creatures for 2 days. Chapter 508. The whole forest was dead silent. It was not as lively as it was when they first came in. Xiaoqing suspected that the place where they stayed before was not the same as the place where they were now. The quieter it was, the more dangerous Xiaoqing felt. She estimated that they were now in the depths of the forest and would soon reach the deepest part. Let's take a rest first. It's late. The forest was dark even during the day because the tall trees blocked the sunlight. Xiaoqing estimated the time. It was already afternoon. She led the few animals at home to set up camp. They set up a big tent, the kind that the whole family could sleep in. Then, they went out to look for food. Yan Qiyu stayed to take care of the kids. Xiaoqing and Air Dai separated. One went to the east, while the other went to the west. One was responsible for looking for firewood, while the other was responsible for hunting. Air Dai couldn't tell which kind of wild vegetables were edible, so the first task was given to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing mainly looked for wild vegetables, but if she saw some delicious prey, she would also help. After they entered the inner area, it was difficult to meet mutated animals, unless they took the initiative to look for them. For example, they could dig up their nests. Yes, they could dig up their nests directly. No matter how deep they hid, they couldn't hide from Air Dai's search. He was quite sensitive in this aspect. Xiaoqing pushed aside the grass to look for edible wild vegetables, mushrooms, and fungus growing under the trees. As long as it was edible, she would not let it go. She pushed aside the grass and found a pile of delicious mushrooms. She picked them and put them into the telepathic eye space. When she was ready to go to the next place, she saw a field of man-eating flowers not far away. What did it mean to travel far and wide in search of something, only to find it by chance? This was it. It was a whole field of man-eating flowers. Some plants were still small, and the tender flowers hadn't bloomed yet. Some were showing their fangs and claws, shaking their heads. There were two kinds of man-eating flowers. One kind had no leaves, only a huge flower head. It was short and emitted a foul smell to attract insects and small animals. One kind was like Dehua, which could chase after people and bite them when they were arrogant. The former type of man-eating flower grew in clumps. They often grew together and emitted a strong smell, attracting a lot of prey. The latter kind of man-eating flower was a killer in the jungle. They usually lived in groups of 1 or 2, never more than 3 or 4. This place was filled with the same species as the big flowers. They grew one after another, going against the habits of man-eating flowers. Looking up, all he could see were gorgeous flowers swaying their heads, waiting for prey to come closer. Although they looked lazy now, as long as the prey came close, they would quickly become ferocious hunters and quickly devour the prey. Xiaoqing did not dare to be careless. When she approached, she first summoned the vines. The dense vines tightly clustered around her, protecting Xiaoqing. As soon as Xiaoqing got close to the man-eating flowers, those man-eating flowers quickly raised their heads. Some of them were closer to Xiaoqing. They had already opened their petals, revealing the sharp thorns hidden in the petals. Then, they were whipped by the vines and fell to the ground. After Xiaoqing entered the flower field, from the outside, she seemed to be surrounded. All the man-eating flowers turned their heads to her, eyeing covetously, as if they wanted to eat her. There were too many man-eating flowers here, especially in the periphery of the flower field. They were all low-level. Xiaoqing felt that she could release the big flowers and let them eat happily. There was a sweet smell in the air. Contrary to this smell, the thorns of the man-eating flowers were exposed in the air. Those sharp thorns were like fangs, shining with cold light. Chapter 509. The big flower was released by Xiaoqing. As soon as it came out, it saw the dense man-eating flowers in front of it. It rubbed its leaves happily, and the petals opened and closed, trying to get into the flowers to eat. Those man-eating flowers had been arrogantly standing upright. Even if they were being whipped around by the vines, they could still show their teeth to Xiaoqing tenaciously. But as soon as the big flower came out, the arrogant man-eating flowers were frightened at once. One by one, their whole flower heads drooped down, as if they had surrendered. Yes, they surrendered to the big flower. The big flower was a level 6 man-eating flower, which had crushed them in level. It could be said that the big flower deserved to be the king among the man-eating flowers. All the man-eating flowers lowered their heads. However, there was one man-eating flower that angrily stretched out its leaves. Thin vines drilled out from under the leaves. In the air, it was as if a group of demons were dancing wildly. Xiaoqing's eyes lit up at once. A high-level man-eating flower. The big flower was already level 6, but it just sprouted its vines not long ago. So the man-eating flower in front of her was probably a little more high-level than the big flower. What Xiaoqing was looking for was the high-level man-eating flower, wasn't it? This man-eating flower should be the king of the man-eating flowers. Before the big flower came, it deserved to be the first. But the big flower came and challenged its position, so it was angry. The flower was raised by Xiaoqing, and it was almost flawless. Not to mention the man-eating flower that was a little stronger than it. Even if it was a level 7 or 8 man-eating flower in front of it, it would dare to provoke it arrogantly. It was like a spoiled brat. As soon as it felt the provocation from another man-eating flower, it immediately opened its fat petals. The petals of the big flower were especially thick and large. The diameter of the entire flower head was about 1 meter. The outer petals were half a meter long, and the inner petals were tender and much shorter. It was the inner petals that were often pulled off by Xiaoqing. The flower was already very big, but the man-eating flower was a little bigger than the flower. Its plump petals were red with a hint of purple, and even its mouthpiece looked longer than the flowers. The big flower was very dissatisfied. Since it followed Xiaoqing, it had always been the boss of Xiaoqing. When had it ever been suppressed by other flowers? He immediately waved his roots and jumped over. The tender tentacles grew in the wind in an instant, turning into long vines that shot towards the man-eating flower at lightning speed. The man-eating flower's vines immediately stretched out and fought with the big flower in the air. The surrounding man-eating flowers all lowered their heads obediently and lay on the ground, shivering. This was a fight between two kings. The only thing they could do was to watch honestly and carefully shrink, so as not to be affected. The man-eating flower was a little more advanced than the big flower. It was reasonable to say that it was stronger than the big flower. However, there was still Xiaoqing behind the big flower to provide it with energy, so the two flowers were equally matched and in a stalemate. Xiaoqing calmly watched the two flowers fighting and still had time to tell the big flower, "Don't break it. You know I need it to provide me with corrosive liquid. If it is broken, you can replace it and stay in the laboratory to provide corrosive liquid every day." The big flower was scared and its petals trembled. It didn't dare to be arrogant and fought with the man-eating flower on the opposite side. Xiaoqing took advantage of the time when they were fighting and released Guangguang. As soon as Guangguang took root in the soil, it stretched its branches and leaves comfortably. Xiaoqing found that it was going to upgrade. Chapter 5:10. The moment the roots touched the soil, Guangguang's roots absorbed an abundant amount of energy, which was even transferred to Xiaoqing's body. Xiaoqing pulled out her dagger and parted the dense cannibal flowers. Then, she found that the soil below was red. The greasy sweetness did not come from the cannibal flowers, but from the red soil. When she stepped on it, she could see the red liquid oozing out of the soil, which looked like blood. Xiaoqing was sure that the soil contained abundant energy, which could support such a group of cannibal flowers and make a king among them. Good stuff. Xiaoqing pinched a handful of soil and twisted it with her fingers. The red soil was very fine, like the sand left behind after being washed by water countless times on the beach. It was also a little soft. After twisting the soft soil, Xiaoqing's fingers were left with a light red color. She sniffed it, and it smelled very sweet. If she could smell the sweetness with her nose, it was at least at the level of greasy sweetness. Xiaoqing said to the big flower, "Stick the roots in." The big flower did not know what was going on, but it habitually obeyed Xiaoqing's order and quickly stuck the roots it used as its feet into the ground. In an instant, the energy flowing into its body made it feel as if it was floating in the air. Some of the energy also flowed into Xiaoqing's body through its body. Xiaoqing could not help but let out all her babies. When those vines and the roots of the qiutang and other plants went into the ground, Xiaoqing had the illusion that she was going to reach the middle stage of level 6 immediately. No, it was not an illusion. If she squatted here and let her little vines absorb the energy for a while, she might really reach the middle stage of level 6. The higher the level, the harder it was to break through. At her level, she was absorbing high-level zombie nuclei every day, but the progress was only a little. Xiaoqing estimated that if there were no special circumstances, it would take her more than a year to reach the middle stage of level 6. But now, it took her more than a year to reach the middle stage of level 6. What kind of speed was that? Xiaoqing did not want to let the big flower kill the cannibal flower. She wanted to move a small stool, eat some sunflower seeds, and watch the show while absorbing the energy. That was awesome. But after thinking about it, she gave up because she had to go back to cook. Cooking was the most important thing in the world. She could not let her babies starve. Xiaoqing raised her hand, and countless vines flew out, tightly binding the cannibal flower. At the same time, Guang began to shake its branches and leaves, and stars slowly fell slowly. It was a beautiful scene. But as long as these little dots of light fell on the petals or leaves of the man-eating flower, the flower would lose all its strength and slowly go limp. Even the biggest flower was no exception. The big flower, it had just warmed up. It had not come out for a long time. It had finally found an opponent that was on par with it and could have a great battle, but it had been defeated by its master. It could not tell if this was a tragedy or a blessing. Xiaoqing pulled the huge cannibal flower out of the soil. Once it was out of the soil, it became even more dispirited. Xiaoqing tied it up tightly to prevent it from escaping. When they got back, she would hand it over to Yan Qiyu and let her squeeze out all the corrosive juice in its body. If it was obedient, Xiaoqing would keep it and extract the corrosive juice after a period of time. If it was not obedient, it was fine. She would let the big flower eat it after she squeezed out all the corrosive juice in its body. It would not go to waste no matter what. The dispirited cannibal flower could not help but shiver. It trembled a little and curled up its leaves. Without this cannibal flower, the big flower was really the king of the cannibal flowers. It roared and pounced forward. It picked a few strong man-eating flowers and swallowed them. The remaining man-eating flowers all lay on the ground pitifully. They expressed their submission and fear at the same time. Xiaoqing glanced at it and ordered the big flower to take its little brothers to one side. She wanted to take away the soil in the ground. With the big flower's order, the cannibal flowers had to obey even if they were unwilling. Of course, there were also some who disobeyed, and they all became the big flower's food. A bunch of cannibal flowers pulled themselves out of the ground, touched the ground with their roots, and ran away with their leaves holding the flower heads. The scene was very funny and inexplicably funny. After they left, they stood in a row from tall to short, trembling and waiting for the big flower to choose something to eat. Xiaoqing rolled up her sleeves and was ready to dig 3 feet into the ground. Chapter 5:11. After the man-eating flowers left, the ground was red. The color of the soil was very bright, as if blood had been poured down and soaked the ground. However, he did not know how much blood would be needed to completely soak this piece of land, to the point where the blood would overflow from it. Xiaoqing rolled up her sleeves and took out a shovel from the space. Sometimes, her space was like a robot cat's pocket, always finding strange things. For example, this shovel that she didn't know when she threw it in. The soil below was also red. After digging nearly half a meter deep, the color of the soil returned to normal. Xiaoqing didn't know why the soil became like this, but it was enough for her to know that the soil was good. Xiaoqing, who was addicted to digging the soil, forgot the time. Yan Qiyu and the others, who had been waiting for her for a long time, came out to look for her, only to find that Xiaoqing was digging the soil with her butt up. She was digging happily. The space was originally full of things, but she directly cleared away some of the useless things and put the soil in. After seeing Yan Qiyu and the others, Xiaoqing waved her hand, "Come and help me." At first, Yan Qiyu thought that there was something in the ground and she was looking for it. Later, he found that Xiaoqing was just looking for the soil in the ground. The corner of his mouth twitched. He took the shovel from Xiaoqing and began to work. What's the problem? He'd better ask after it was over. Looking at Xiaoqing's fanatical look, he guessed that he couldn't get the answer now. The two of them struggled for a long time before they dug out all the red soil and put it into Xiaoqing's space. Xiaoqing was very satisfied. She said to Yan Qiue, I'm going to take the seeds of the plants back and plant them in Jiang City. Why do you suddenly want to do this? Yan Qiue asked in confusion. Xiaoqing then told Yan Qiue what she had discovered. Yan Qiue was also curious. Get me some when we get back. I'll do my research. Xiaoqing agreed. Then, she instructed Dehua to pick what she needed to pick and eat what she could eat. She also didn't forget to leave some seeds for others. It was too cruel to eat all the seeds until they became extinct. The big flower picked a few that seemed to be of a higher level and ate them. As for the rest of the seedlings, it generously let them go. There was a saying among humans that was called draining the pond to catch all the fish. In its opinion, it was also extremely stupid. These man-eating flowers stayed where they were and wouldn't run away. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to run far. It had eaten them all at once, and it wouldn't be able to eat them again. It was better to keep some of the less tasty seedlings and wait for them to grow up before eating them. What was this behavior called again? That's right, captivity. This forest was where it kept its food. Thinking about it, such a large forest was like a refrigerator that could keep food fresh. There was food everywhere. It could come and eat whenever it wanted to. It was simply awesome. The man-eating flowers that were let go trembled. Under Dehua's tyranny, they obediently returned to their original positions and took root near their original positions. This way, Dehua wouldn't have to look everywhere the next time it came. It was very convenient. She felt that she was so chicken juicy equals V equals let's go. Xiaoqing patted Dehua's head. Then, she brought Dehua and the other man-eating flower that was tied up into a ball and returned with Yan Qiue. Dai was in charge of looking after the children. When they returned, Xiaoyu was lying on Dai's neck. Dai held Xiaohua's left hand and Little Bun's right hand. It was very harmonious. It was like a group of left-behind children waiting for their parents to return. Xiaoqing's heart ached as she patted Dai's head. Then, she threw the man-eating flower into a corner. Qiue, bring some juice back. Dehua will cooperate with you. Discuss with this man-eating flower. If it's willing to continue cooperating with you in your research, we'll keep it. If it's not willing, it's fine. It's not bad to let Dehua eat all of its corrosive juice. Chapter 5:12. The man-eating flower in the corner trembled when it heard that. At its level, it had a certain level of consciousness. It was simply a threat to a flower. Flowers also had the right to be a flower. Before the angry man-eating flower could express how angry it was dragged into the tent by Yan Qiue. The big flower also jumped over, shaking its leaves, like a playboy's henchman. Yan Qiue smiled and took out the tools to extract the juice, then took out a test tube made of the big flower's petals. He said very gently, "Are you willing to cooperate with me, or are you willing to be eaten? I'm an ambitious man-eating flower." The man-eating flower shook its head, and lowered its head to show that it surrendered. It was better to live than to die. After all, it was a high-level man-eating flower. It would be a pity if it died. With the man-eating flower in hand, they had completed half of the purpose of this trip. The other half was naturally a plant that Xiaoqing wanted to subdue. Therefore, they didn't leave immediately, and planned to go deeper. After a night's rest, they were ready to continue moving forward. Probably their good luck was almost used up, so they continued to move forward for another 3 days. It seemed that they were infinitely close to the core, but they didn't encounter anything. Looking at the time, Xiaoqing couldn't help but give up. I'm worried that something has happened outside. Let's go back first. Let's walk for another day. If we still haven't found anything, we'll go back. Yan Qiue insisted. People who didn't know him would think that he wanted to subdue the plant. In Yan Qiue's heart, probably all the people in the world were not as important as a single hair on Xiaoqing's body. He didn't want to delay Xiaoqing's improvement because of other people's affairs. He also knew that Xiaoqing would definitely not agree with his idea, so he compromised. Xiaoqing nodded and agreed. Then she felt very lucky that she didn't leave early, because in the afternoon of the second day, when they were about to leave, they finally arrived at the deepest part of the jungle, which was also the most mysterious place. The grass on the ground grew taller and thicker. Xiaoqing felt that something was wrong. She told the people around her to be careful. Then, she used the vines to open a path. The vines parted the grass, revealing a secret realm that looked like a paradise. It was very beautiful. The tall and low trees were shining with green fluorescence. There were also groups of fireflies under the trees. The grass was soft, and there was even a little dew on the leaves. The grass below looked especially fresh. It was so beautiful that it was like an illusion. Xiaoqing couldn't help but rub her eyes to make sure that she didn't come to the wrong place. Was this really a forest filled with danger? She was starting to have doubts. Before they stepped in, a bouncing rabbit jumped in. In the next second, red vines drilled out of the ground like greedy tongues, wrapped around the rabbit and dragged it away. The peaceful and quiet atmosphere was broken in an instant. Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief. This was the jungle she knew. Everyone, be careful. Xiaoqing was the first to walk in. Although she knew that there were many dangers under the gorgeous appearance, this place was still too beautiful. It was like the paradise that many young girls dreamed of when they were young. Xiaoqing walked a few steps and felt that something was wrong. The footsteps of Air Dai and the others disappeared. Xiaoqing turned around, but there was no one behind her. Xiaoqing's expression changed immediately. Little Bun, Air Dai, and Yan Qiue were the most important people to her. Also, Xiaohua and Xiaoyu had joined her team. They were the people that she wanted to protect. However, in just a few seconds, they were all gone. Xiaoqing's face turned pale. She couldn't help but walk back to look for Air Dai and the others. The more she walked, the more she felt that something was wrong. The jungle around her had turned into tall buildings. Mu Lin appeared beside her with a big belly. His eyes were curved. Ah Qing, what do you think the child should be named? Mu Lin. Xiaoqing couldn't help but close her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes were a little sore. Her fingertips trembled as she held Mu Lin's hand. It was warm. Qing, what's wrong? Mu Lin touched Xiaoqing's forehead in confusion. It's not hot, I'm fine. Xiaoqing tried hard to hold back the urge to cry. Although she knew that she didn't have tears, she said, didn't we talk about this before? If you give birth to the child, let him be called Munyanqing. It sounds good whether it's a boy or a girl. Mu Lin bit his lips and said, but the child has to follow his father's surname. Your surname is Xing. Xiaoqing gently touched Mu Lin's stomach and smiled. That's pretty good too. I want him to be called Jingxiang. I miss you, Mu Lin said softly. Mu Lin said softly, it doesn't matter if you go to the ends of the earth or if you're by my side. I'll miss you. Xiaoqing couldn't hold it in anymore. She clearly didn't have tears, but she still felt that her eyes were wet. Jingxiang, it's very nice, very nice. I have a baby too. I haven't named him yet. He's just waiting for you. Didn't you say that you want to be his godmother? Xiaoqing held Mulin's hand tightly as if Mulin would disappear if she let go. Mulin said in surprise, "Where is he? I want to see my godson. Hurry up and call him out." "I'll bring you to see him soon," Xiaoqing said softly. "He's very cute. His facial features are like mine. You'll definitely like him. Your son must be very handsome. If I give birth to a daughter, I'll marry your son in the future." Mulin leaned on Xiaoqing's shoulder and chuckled. "I remember when I was young, I've said that if you were a boy, I'd definitely marry you. Since I can't marry you, I'll let my daughter marry your son. I still don't know if it's a boy or a girl in your belly." Xiaoqing hugged Mulin tightly. It was very warm, very warm. It was so warm that it made her want to sleep. The corners of her eyes were a little moist and trembling. After a long time, she said softly, "I miss you too, Mulin. But, this isn't you." She waved her hand gently and her sharp nails scratched out. Mulin's frightened expression froze and finally turned into flying green spots. A long vine was inserted into Xiaoqing's chest like a straw, sucking something. Xiaoqing sneered. She didn't have blood at all. Chapter 5:13. She had sensed that something was wrong from the beginning, but the illusion was too realistic, so she was in a trance for a moment. The person who appeared in the illusion was actually Mulin. Mulin. The two of them came out from the orphanage together. It could be said that they depended on each other for survival. During the toughest times, the two of them had to eat a dry steamed bun, the kind that didn't even have a pickle. They had gone through the toughest times together. They had gone through thick and thin together. Xiaoqing still remembered Mulin's words, "If you were a man, I would marry you." However, after the apocalypse, she had gone through almost half of the country, but she had not met Mulin. To be honest, Xiaoqing was in despair. After all, it was the apocalypse. No one dared to say that they could survive until now. Even Xiaoqing, who had confidence in Mulin, did not dare to say it. She could only keep her worries in her heart. Unexpectedly, Mulin appeared in this environment. Xiaoqing had noticed when the vine pierced into her chest and sucked her blood. She did not break free because she wanted to take another look at Mulin. Zombies. Where did the blood come from? Xiaoqing tore off the vine that pierced into her body. She glanced around and immediately found the unconscious Yan Qiue and the others. Each of them was pierced by a thin vine. The others were fine, but Yan Qiue could not bear it. He was a normal person. He would die if he lost too much blood. Xiaoqing quickly cut off the vine on Yan Qiue's body and covered the wound. The wound was very thin, but blood was still flowing out. Yan Qiue frowned. His face was pale. After the vine was cut off, he suddenly opened his eyes and hugged Xiaoqing. "No." Xiaoqing was shocked. She quickly asked, "What's wrong?" "Sorry, I was careless." Yan Qiue's eyes were unfocused. After he focused on Xiaoqing, he was relieved and hugged Xiaoqing tightly. "Don't leave me." Xiaoqing felt that he probably saw something similar to them breaking up in the illusion. After comforting Yan Qiue, Xiaoqing rescued the others. During this time, Yan Qiue had been hugging his knees with a cold look in his eyes. He had encountered an illusion. In the illusion, Xiaoqing had saved many people, but they wanted to kill Xiaoqing because Xiaoqing was a zombie. Because she was not one of them, she was bound to have evil intentions. Yan Qiue couldn't stop him. He vaguely remembered that he had been chopped into minced meat. His only intact hand was still grabbing onto someone's pants. He was clearly dead, but he could still watch those people hurt the woman he loved the most. Her pain and despair were deeply imprinted on Yan Qiue's body. Yan Qiue only felt that even the slightest breath would make his heart ache terribly. This was because he knew that with Xiaoqing's personality, if she really encountered a large-scale disaster, she would really save people. And with the deep-rooted bad habits of human beings, as long as they found out Xiaoqing's identity, they would also repay kindness with ingratitude. Although he knew that the possibility of this kind of thing happening was very small, Yan Qiue couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't help but be afraid and think about it. What if? Yan Qiue didn't want to see any threat to Xiaoqing's safety, not even the slightest. After Xiaoqing saved everyone, they all woke up. Everyone's illusion was different, but the similarity was probably related to emotions. Happiness, anger, sadness, happiness, and unhappiness. After saving people, Xiaoqing set her eyes on the flower in the center. It was very beautiful. Chapter 5:14. Anyone who saw everything in front of them would be most suspicious of this tree. It was taller than Guang Guang and was as tall as a canopy. There were many small animals that looked like fireflies resting on the branches and leaves, making the entire tree look like it was glowing. However, the first thing that Xiaoqing saw was the vines that wrapped around the tree. The vines looked very thin and docile. Even the thorns looked a little crisp and soft. The vines extended all the way to the crown of the tree. There was a very beautiful flower that poked its head out from the crown of the tree. The young petals were very big and the color was a bright red. The color was slightly dark, contrasting with the delicate center of the flower. It was like the contrast between venous blood and arterial blood. The stamen of the flower was curled up like small tentacles. It looked very harmless, but Xiaoqing couldn't take her eyes off this flower. The hallucinogenic fragrance was emitted from this flower. It could be said that the culprit that made Xiaoqing and the others fall into a coma was this flower. The more delicate it looked, the more dangerous it felt to Xiaoqing. It made Xiaoqing feel that this flower was watered with blood to become its current color. As soon as Xiaoqing broke free from this flower, it immediately curled up and acted harmless, trying to fool Xiaoqing. But how was that possible? Xiaoqing sneered and released her big flower and vines. She also released Guang Guang to protect Air Dai and the others so that they wouldn't be hurt. Only then did she feel at ease to deal with this flower. It was relatively easy for her to suppress this flower. Its level was quite high, but compared to Xiaoqing, who had a group of little brothers, it was still a lot weaker. However, Xiaoqing wanted to see what abilities it had to decide if she should use it as the sixth plant. After all, there was a limit to the number of slots she had. A precious slot needed to be carefully studied before she could confirm it. Otherwise, it would be extremely troublesome if she found that it was no longer useful and had to change it. Then, Xiaoqing discovered that this flower's greatest ability was to cause hallucinations. If its hallucinations were combined with Guang Guang, the effect would be very good. Moreover, its vines could also assist Xiaoqing's vines. When the time came, she would put down Guang Guang's blessing and let the flower hide on Guang Guang's body. Then, she would release the vines. Whoever entered this domain would die. Xiaoqing happily subdued the flower. Then, she realized that its most powerful ability was not hallucination, but an ability similar to Little Bun's devouring ability. It could take root in the bodies of humans, animals, and even plants. It could absorb blood and plant juices and convert them into energy to nourish itself. In other words, as long as there were living creatures around it, it would never run out of energy. Coupled with its hallucinogenic ability and the attack power of its vines, not many people were a match for it. Especially when it relied on the tenacious tree it was clinging to, it was simply invincible. In the end, it was unlucky to meet Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing was its nemesis. Firstly, Xiaoqing did not have fresh blood and would not provide it with any energy. Secondly, it stretched out its vines, wanting to pierce into the bodies of the surrounding plants to absorb some energy. In the end, just as the thin vines stretched out, it was broken by Xiaoqing's vines. A second of silence. After following Xiaoqing, Xiaoqing was like a tiger that had grown wings. She was now the least afraid of group fights. When the time came, she would stand in the crowd, put down Guang Guang, plant the flower she named Little Red, and scatter the daughter. With Lord Vine in hand, Chiu Tang would ambush, and the big flower would take the heads of people. When its power was exhausted, she would let Little Red absorb the energy and feed it back to her. She was invincible as if she had cheated. Xiaoqing was satisfied. She prepared to leave with the injured people in the house. Then, she shrunk Little Red that was wrapped around her wrist. Suddenly, it stretched out its feelers and pointed behind the tree. What was there? Xiaoqing instructed Dai to lean on Guang Guang and take care of everyone. Then, she walked over. As soon as she walked over, Xiaoqing was dumbfounded. Behind the tree, there was a deep pit. The pit was very deep, but when she lowered her head, she could see something at the bottom of the pit. There was a huge thing that looked like a flower bud at the bottom of the pit. If one ignored the outer layer of the placenta, this flower bud looked more like a giant heart. There were many bones hanging on the walls of the pit. It was the same at the bottom of the pit. There were probably many animals or humans who had become the waste of this heart. Little Red vaguely conveyed this information to Xiaoqing. These prey were all thrown in by the surrounding plants as fertilizer. This heart was considered a kind of plant, but it was not. It contained a lot of energy. Once it matured and was swallowed, there was a chance for it to rise to level 7 or even level 8. As the overlord of this area, Little Red had already treated this thing as something in her pocket. She was just waiting for it to mature so that she could eat it. In the end, she did not expect that it would become something in Xiaoqing's pocket. So, Little Red could not help but offer up this treasure. She also could not bear to let the thing that she had raised for so long go to another plant. Rather than letting someone else take advantage of it, she would rather give it to her own master. Since she had already boarded the pirate ship, the stronger Xiaoqing was, the better it would be for Little Red. It could be said that Little Red's tactic of changing the rudder according to the wind was pretty good. At the very least, Big Red was stomping its feet in anger. Big Red had fallen out of favor for a long time. It had finally regained its favor after much difficulty, but there was actually a new flower who was fawning over its master the moment it joined the crew. Did she not know the concept of first come, first served? Did she not know that she had to respect Old Red? Was it not good to be a quiet and beautiful flower? Why did she have to compete with it for favor? How shameless! Xiaoqing did not know that there were scheming flowers around her who were secretly opposing her. She was using vines to tie up a big tree at the side, trying to go down to the bottom of the pit and pull out the thing by its roots. It was not mature yet. If she ate it now, the effect would definitely not be great. However, Xiaoqing was not afraid. Didn't she just harvest a pile of soil that contained rich energy? She could totally pull this thing out and take it back to raise it. How troublesome would it be to leave it here? No one knew when someone would come and take this thing away. When that time came, where would Xiaoqing go to cry? The one who strikes first gains the advantage, and the one who strikes later suffers. It would be more reassuring to raise it in her own home. Therefore, Xiaoqing climbed down. She pulled the vines, stepped on the wall, and carefully reached the bottom of the pit. When she reached the bottom of the pit and observed this thing at a close distance, she felt that this thing was even more like a heart. Whether it was the clear veins under the skin or the shape, it was very similar to a heart. It was more like it would beat slowly every once in a while. It was like the heart was expanding and shrinking along with a person's breathing. It was too similar. It was a little creepy, especially Xiaoqing. She was stunned for a long time, not knowing how to start. Chapter 5:15. Reality proved that there were benefits to having a scary appearance. At least, even Xiaoqing, with her mental fortitude, felt helpless when faced with this thing. Before she could do anything, the big flower took action. Many vines crawled out from under the big flower's leaves and wrapped around the heart-like thing. It was pulled out with brute force. The roots of this thing looked like the feet of an octopus. They were soft and wriggling. Xiaoqing was a little worried. She couldn't just hug it everywhere she went, right? She suddenly had an idea. If the vegetables she pulled out could be put into her space, what about this thing? As soon as she thought of it, she tried it out. She casually stuffed this thing into her space, and it actually went in. Her space had always been unable to store living things. Could it be that this thing wasn't a living thing? Anyway, it was a good thing. At least it was more convenient for her. Xiaoqing even planted this thing on the red soil so that she could climb up with ease. Her whole family was old, weak, sick, and disabled now. Finally, she completed this task perfectly and could leave without any regrets. On the way back, Xiaoqing wanted to pull out more kinds of plants and plant them near Jiangqing City or directly in the city. However, she found that ordinary mutant plants could be put into her space. But after taking them out, they could only be eaten like vegetables. The only thing that was still alive was the heart. She had to give up and leave reluctantly. She planned to organize some people and come back after a period of time. When they returned to the seaside as fast as they could, Qin Zishi had already gone back to the capital once and brought news from there. The capital had decided to send people to Country M. In addition to the previous two reasons, there was one more reason, which was to find the source of the black bugs. After research in Jingdong, they found that the black bugs had a mother. As long as the mother didn't die, it could produce a lot of black bugs every day. It was useless to treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Among the people who went abroad, there were Wu Jiaojiao, the boss of thorns and roses, Jin Mingyu, the boss of ice, and Zhu Mochin. In addition to the three of them, there was another very powerful paranormal called Tu Xian. He was a man who looked very polite and cultured. He also brought along two similar civilian staff members. There was also Qin Zishi and Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing didn't plan to bring Yan Qiuyue along this time because someone had to send the kids back. Yan Qiuyue was very against it, but the head of the family was Xiaoqing. He could only sob and leave with the three children, letting Xiaoqing and Dai have their own world. Before they boarded the ship, the others did not know that two more people were added to this operation. When the ship was about to set sail, Xiaoqing and Dai boarded the ship. As soon as the two of them came up, some people became stiff. That year, Xiaoqing was angry for Lan Yan and almost tore down the whole capital. They all saw it. Now, this god of slaughter actually wanted to work with them. Xiaoqing smiled and waved her hand. "We meet again. How have you been recently?" Jin Mingyu said dryly, "Pretty good." Wu Jiaojiao was more curious because she still refused to believe that Xiaoqing and Dai were zombies. How did they look like zombies? If zombies were like the two of them, humans would have gone extinct a long time ago. The two civilian staff members were more scared. They shrank into a corner and trembled. After Xiaoqing greeted them, she went to a corner with Qin Zishi and Zhu Mochin. The few of them sat near the railing and looked at the sea while chatting. Chapter 5:16. Xiaoqing actually had a selfish motive for this trip. She wanted to have a one-on-one honeymoon with Dai and then with Yan Qiuyue. According to the order of arrival, the first honeymoon would naturally be with Dai. There were some aspects of a 3-on-1 honeymoon that were inconvenient. Moreover, if one was close to one, the other would be left out. If one was close to one, the other would be left out. Indeed, a two-person world was the best. I remember the last time we went out to sea. We encountered an underwater volcano eruption. Xiaoqing wanted to laugh when she thought about it. I've always thought that I have a good character. In the end, wherever I go, something is bound to happen. Qin Zixi expression immediately changed. My sister Qing, please don't jinx it. Xiaoqing said helplessly, how can this thing be so effective? If whatever I say comes true, we'll definitely be safe this time. As she spoke, she laughed. If my mouth is really so effective, I'll curse those who oppose me to die first. Qin Zixi could only laugh helplessly. At night, the few of them gathered in Xiaoqing's room to cook. Cheng Lixue prepared a double-flavored pot with ingredients for San Xian on one side and super spicy ingredients on the other. The few of them ate until their lips were red and a little numb. At this moment, the helmsman's panicked voice suddenly came from outside. We've encountered a storm. Everyone, try to stay in your rooms. Don't come out, and don't go to the deck. Xiaoqing, the way Qin Zixi and the others looked at Xiaoqing was a little strange. This crow's beak was really accurate. Xiaoqing felt like she had been shot in the knee. Could it be that she was actually the nth generation heir of the Yanling family? Alright, let's go back to our rooms when we're full. Xiaoqing said helplessly, from what you said, it shouldn't be a big storm. Moreover, we're not far from the shore. Even if the ship, Sister Qing. Qin Zixi turned pale with fright. Don't say it. Xiaoqing, she fell silent and obediently went to bed with her Dai. Xiaoqing actually didn't care about whether the boat would capsize or not. The only thing she cared about was that if the boat capsized, they would have to go back and change to another boat, which would be a waste of time. As for other aspects, she was not worried. This was probably confidence brought about by strength. Xiaoqing hugged Dai and climbed onto the bed. Then she realized that she hadn't hugged Dai like this for a long time. The last time she hugged Dai like this was a long time ago. She seemed to have neglected Dai recently. Dai didn't know how to speak. She didn't know how to express her emotions. Even if she was unhappy, she would only look at Xiaoqing quietly with her big eyes. As long as Xiaoqing looked at her, there would only be happiness in her eyes. Dai was so obedient that people would unconsciously feel relieved and forget about her. Xiaoqing was very distressed. She hugged Dai and kissed the top of his head. She said in a muffled voice, actually, you're cute when you're jealous. You're cute when you're naughty. You're cute no matter what. Dai hugged Xiaoqing back. Since they were together, he had become quieter and more obedient. It was as if he had matured overnight. In fact, if one looked carefully, they would find that he was still the jealous and spoiled Dai. When we go back, we'll find a way to plant plants all around Jiang City. They must be edible. It's best if they are edible and can be used for defense. I want to open up a separate piece of land and plant all the things you like to eat. Xiaoqing leaned on Dai inside, so what if it's the end of the world? As long as we're happy as a family, it's fine. Dai quietly took off his clothes so that Xiaoqing could rest on his chest. Then he hugged Xiaoqing with satisfaction. He didn't know about those things. He only knew that he liked Xiaoqing and wanted to be with her forever. Dai loved other people because he loved them. If those people weren't important to Xiaoqing, he wouldn't even look at them. The best time of his life was the time he spent with Xiaoqing. Although these days, some strange images flashed in his mind. Those images didn't look like him. He should be Air Dai. He should be the silly Air Dai that belonged to Xiaoqing. He shouldn't be the gloomy and scary teenager that appeared in his mind. That couldn't be him. Xiaoqing definitely wouldn't like him. As Dummy Air thought about it, he shivered and hugged Xiaoqing tightly. His beast instinct told him that those memories were not necessarily good, so he was somewhat resistant. The more a person with amnesia cooperated to find his memories, the faster he recovered. The more he resisted, the slower he recovered. This was normal. Air Dai resisted. But no matter how much he resisted, he recovered bit by bit. This was also the reason why he became more and more silent. Sometimes he couldn't distinguish between reality and memory. But as long as he held Xiaoqing's hand, he would calm down. Because only in reality did he have Xiaoqing. If you could talk, you would. Xiaoqing touched Air Dai's cheek. She couldn't help but stop. If Air Dai recovered, he would probably leave. She imagined Air Dai changing into a different person. Perhaps the real Air Dai would be gentle and elegant but always distant. Or maybe he would be calm and self-controlled. He wouldn't care about everything that happened when he lost his memory. He might even think that this relationship was ridiculous. Or maybe he would be serious and calm. He would think that it was humiliating to have the same woman as another man. But no matter how she thought, how she constructed, and what kind of personality she constructed, as long as she imagined that person as Air Dai, she would think that he was cute. She was hopeless. Even though she always told herself that if Air Dai recovered his memory and wanted to leave, she would let him go, she was always calm and prepared to imprison him if Air Dai left. This was her, a terrible, duplicitous woman. She was really capable of doing this. Imprisoning him by her side and chaining him up was probably a good choice. Then he wouldn't be able to leave. Even if he hated her, he could only stay by her side. With this thought, the corners of Xiaoqing's eyes turned red. She couldn't help but cover her face. Yan Qiue had indeed led her astray. She was already bad, but this wasn't bad either. Air Dai seriously pulled Xiaoqing's hand away and planted a kiss at the corner of her eye. The gentleness in his eyes was about to overflow. Xiaoqing hugged Air Dai's waist and closed her eyes in satisfaction. He could only be hers. No one could take him away. Chapter 5:17. Xiaoqing's luck finally turned for the better. Although they encountered a storm, they were lucky that their boat was safe after it was over. It was a blessing in disguise. Even Qin Zishi teased Xiaoqing. Although she was a jinx, she was a good person. At least they were safe for now. After the last storm, they had not encountered a second natural or man-made disaster. But other than Qin Zishi and the others, everyone wanted to kill Xiaoqing. Life on the sea was like this. They had no choice but to eat dry food every day. In order to prevent scurvy, they ate the fruits they brought with them. They only dared to eat a little each time because there wasn't much of it. As for Xiaoqing and the others, their lives were like this. Every day, they would discuss what to eat today. Every day, they would try new dishes. While they were pitifully gnawing on dry food, the others were eating seafood, barbecued meat, 3 meat dishes, 1 vegetable dish, and even soup. Other than being infuriated, what else could they say? They couldn't beat Air Dai in a fight, nor did they dare to scold him. Some shameless people even tried to eat some food, but when they got close, they saw Air Dai grinning at them. His teeth and expression couldn't be described by the word fierce. Therefore, they gave up obediently. Some smart people wanted to buy some food from Xiaoqing, but after hearing the price, they gave up, because they really couldn't afford it. Some people secretly complained about Xiaoqing, but after thinking about it carefully, they felt that the price was actually quite reasonable. After all, fresh vegetables were very expensive on land, including meat and seafood. Although they were very common on the sea, what was more common on the sea were fierce beasts. Except for a master like Xiaoqing, there weren't many people who dared to go to the sea to look for food. Vegetables and meat were expensive on land, so they would definitely be more expensive on the sea. After all, the rarer something was, the more expensive it was. Besides, there were processing fees. Didn't people need money to cook? After thinking about it carefully, it was still very expensive. But what could they do? They couldn't force people to buy, sell, or rob. If they couldn't afford it, they could only watch. But the point was that Xiaoqing and the others were too much. Couldn't they hide their food and go back to their rooms? Don't let them see it. Even if she didn't want to eat in the room because it was too cramped, she could have eaten on the deck. Could she not seduce them? That aroma, that dish, some people deliberately praised it loudly, as if they were afraid that they didn't know how delicious the dish was. To hell with being shameless. Therefore, other than Xiaoqing's group, everyone else was living in an abyss of suffering, while Xiaoqing's group's life was like heaven. This kind of gap made people have the urge to kill people every minute and every second. After enduring for a while, they finally arrived at Country M. The moment they saw the shore, a group of people cheered. The cheers were so loud that Xiaoqing was stunned. They hadn't been drifting on the sea for long. This group of people really couldn't bear hardships. How could this be? Xiaoqing, who didn't feel that she had abused their spirit, shook her head and looked helpless. Young people nowadays couldn't bear hardships compared to her generation. They stopped the ship on the shore and threw the anchor to prevent the ship from drifting away without them knowing. Then, the group officially went ashore. As soon as they went ashore, they noticed the difference between Country M and China. Country M was too desolate. In China, there were many survival bases and active people even on the coast. Chapter 5:18. For example, Fenglan's base was built on the seaside. As for Country M, the first thing they wanted to do after they went ashore was to find a base and have a big meal to satisfy their stomachs, which had been tortured by Xiaoqing. However, after walking for a day, they slowly went deep into Country M, but they didn't see a single person except for some building debris, let alone a survivor base. It was so desolate that Xiaoqing felt like the whole Country M had fallen under the claws of zombies, which wasn't a good thing. It's getting dark. Let's set up camp here for the time being, Qin Zishi said after looking at the sky. The more they were in someone else's territory, the more vigilant they had to be. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. Not to mention them, even Xiaoqing didn't dare to run around at night in a strange foreign country, unless she wanted to die. Therefore, this group of poor people could only continue to accept Xiaoqing's mental abuse when they were full of hope. They rested for a night and continued to walk forward the next day. After walking for more than 2 days, they saw living people for the first time. The living people were a man and a woman, who were surrounded by zombies and looked to be in danger. Xiaoqing and the others happened to pass by and saw them. Originally, they didn't want to save them. After all, they didn't want to save 2 foreigners. It was Xiaoqing who suggested, "I think we should save them. There are so many zombies there, and they are 2 foreigners. Why should we save them? Are you the only one who is kind-hearted? Then you go and save them," one of the 2 civilian staff said stiffly. Xiaoqing ignored him and said faintly, "It's not a good idea for us to run around blindly like headless flies. If we save the 2 of them, they are our countrymen after all. They should know the situation of our country better than we do. They can lead the way for us." Everyone thought about it and agreed. They hadn't met anyone for 2 days. If they didn't save these 2 people, they might really run around like headless flies. They didn't know when they would find a survivor base. With 2 locals leading the way, it was naturally much more convenient. But some people were stubborn. In the time it takes to save him, we might have already found a survivor base. Then go look for it yourself, Xiaoqing said lazily. Then, she led Dai into the battle. As soon as she and Dai went over, Qin Lixi and Zhu Machun followed behind. Then, Wu Jiaojiao joined the fray. Before Wu Jiaojiao joined the fray, she cast a sidelong glance at the civilian who spoke. I've never seen anyone who can talk more than a girl. The civilian staff member glared at him, looking like he wanted to curse but couldn't. When Xiaoqing descended from the sky with her Dai, she saw the man and woman shouting for help with a surprised expression. Before Xiaoqing landed, she stretched out her finger and countless vines rose from the ground. Those vines seemed to be alive, and they trapped the zombies tightly. The 2 foreigners weren't stupid. They quickly picked up their guns and started shooting. Because those zombies were trapped by the vines, they couldn't move at all, so they could shoot one zombie in the head with one shot. Occasionally, their hands would tremble a little, and they would miss their aim. At least 9 out of 10 bullets would hit the target. Dai's lethality was much higher than the 2 foreigners. Wherever it went, there would be a rain of blood. After Xiaoqing landed, she called out Dehua. Dehua rushed into the zombie crowd with its little brother, Xiaohong. Whenever the zombies saw them, Xiaohong would immediately stretch out its tentacles and wrap the zombies tightly, then throw them to Dehua as a show of respect. Chapter 5:19. After all, it mainly sucked blood and energy. Zombies were trash to it. It would be better to use them to please its boss. Dehua was very satisfied with Little Red's tactfulness. It didn't take in this little brother for nothing. The 2 flowers swept through the area quickly. After Dehua leveled up, it ate more and more things. It only ate, but it didn't grow. It didn't even know whose stomach it ate. By the time Qin Zishi and the others arrived, Dehua had already started cleaning up the area. It didn't let go of the broken limbs on the ground. It only cared about stuffing them into its stomach. It looked very ferocious. Xiaoqing also knew a little bird language. She went forward to communicate with the 2 foreigners. The 2 foreigners took the lead and held Xiaoqing's hand. Oh God, we must have met an angel. An angel from the east. Thank you for saving us. Otherwise, we would have become the feces in the zombies' stomachs. Xiaoqing was stunned. Then, she said, "You're welcome." Before she could ask anything, the hospitable and grateful foreigners had already insisted on inviting Xiaoqing to their base as a guest. Since the goal had been achieved, the process didn't matter. Xiaoqing thought to herself expressionlessly. She waved her hand and brought her friends and a group of people who were dragging her down to follow the 2 foreigners. Among the 2 foreigners, the man was a chatterbox. He talked a lot along the way. Xiaoqing didn't need to ask for any information at all. He had already delivered himself to her door. First, Xiaoqing knew their names. However, because it was too complicated, she couldn't remember them. But that wasn't the key. She could call them Man A and Woman B for the time being. The situation in Country M was worse than they had imagined. 3 months ago, an expedition team found a giant hive in the forest that was similar to a beehive but much larger than a beehive. The nature of Country M's adventurous made them unable to resist the temptation to go in and explore. However, the truth was that they had provoked a demon. The outside of the hive looked very old. After entering, they immediately smelled a faint fishy and foul smell. The light became dimmer, and the stench became stronger. There were also cracking sounds under their feet. Someone turned on a flashlight and shone it on the ground. They found that the ground was filled with white bones. Some belonged to animals, and some belonged to humans. At this time, the few of them were already a little scared, but they still mustered up their courage to go deeper. The deeper they went, the stronger the stench became. Then, in the center of the nest, they found a huge pool that was so red that it was almost black, and in the middle of the pool was a large cocoon. They thought that they had discovered a treasure. As they cheered, they prepared to step forward and drag the cocoon back. But the moment they approached, the cocoon broke. Furry worm legs extended out of the cocoon. The last thing to crawl out was a huge queen bee. The three of them woke up from the shock, but it was too late to run. Two of them were quickly pierced through the waist by the sharp end of the queen bee's leg. One of them ran faster. He hurriedly looked back and found that the queen bee had already pierced the stinger into one of the people's bodies. The round eggs were constantly being discharged into the person's body. Not long after, young poisonous wasps came out from under the person's skin. His hair stood on end, and he quickened his pace to leave. After he left, he told the story to others, but very few people believed him. Who would have thought that this was just the beginning? Not long after, black beetles, poisonous bees that liked to eat people, and marching ants crawled out of the forest. They were much more terrifying than zombies. Wherever they passed, not to mention survivors, not even plants survived. Scorched earth and wreckage. The country immediately organized people to resist. They found that the poisonous bees and marching ants were afraid of fire. This should be the nature of insects. But the black beetles were not afraid of anything. They could even devour abilities. Their shells were extremely hard. They could sneak into the city through the walls and eat people into empty shells or piles of bones. Moreover, the poisonous bees and marching ants were limited in their fear of fire. In the entire country, because of these three insects, the number of survivors sharply decreased in a short period of time. Especially in this season, it was the time for the poisonous bees to lay eggs. It was unknown how many people were parasitized. Their bodies were full of poisonous bee eggs, and finally, they were eaten by the little poisonous bees that broke out of their shells. The country's research institute also did research day and night, trying to find the weaknesses of these insects, their natural enemies, and invent something to deal with them. But the fact was that humans were losing ground. At least so far, that thing had not been invented. Chapter 520. The American people retreated and finally gave up the survivor bases on the edge. They all gathered in the center, where there were only 3 large bases left. Apart from these 3 survivor bases, there were very few other bases left. That was why they had not found a single survivor base after walking for so long. In addition to these 3 major survivor bases, there were many individual households in the American. They often lived in remote areas, with a family or 1 or 2 people living together. They were self-sufficient. It was not similar to the current situation in the Celestial Empire. Under the enthusiasm of the 2 foreigners, a group of people went together. The place they were now at was a little far from the nearest base. Xiao Qing asked them, "Do you know any bases with more people in China?" Mane immediately said, "Oh, of course I know. The original Chinatown survivor base was established after the Doomsday. It is very powerful. Even now, it is one of the only 3 survivor bases. Do you want to go there?" Xiao Qing nodded. It was said that these overseas Chinese had contacted the capital and wanted to return to China. They came here partly because of this. Mane hesitated for a while and said, "Well, I will take you there. I know people there. Now the Chinatown survivor base is under martial law. Ordinary people can't enter. Thank you. Xiao Qing thanked him seriously. Then they went in the direction of the Chinatown survivor base. One day was obviously not enough for them to walk to the Chinatown survivor base, so they had to camp at noon and night. Noon was short. Originally, it was enough to deal with it, but there was one who liked to take a nap, that was Air Dai. For some reason, Air Dai was very sleepy recently, and the amount of crystal nuclei he absorbed every day had greatly increased. Xiao Qing laughed at him, "You are eating more and more. If you continue like this, I won't be able to feed you sooner or later." She took out all the high-level crystal nuclei and gave them to Air Dai. In the past, Air Dai didn't sleep during the day or night. Now, he didn't sleep during the day. When he stopped, Xiao Qing would cook. When she finished, she would look back and see that he had already nodded and fallen asleep. Xiao Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The only thing she could do was to drag everyone to take an afternoon nap. What? Unwilling to sleep? What? Do you think napping is a waste of time? What? Did he have to leave? Come, let's exchange some pointers. It just so happens that my hands have been itching recently. After the sparring session with Thornhead, no one else raised any objections. Xiao Qing felt that she was very democratic. Man A and Woman B were new to the team. They didn't know how cruel Xiao Qing was. They were closer to their savior, Xiao Qing. When Xiao Qing was cooking at noon, they kindly provided some ingredients, which were from poisonous bees. Although these poisonous bees were good at killing people, they were even better at making honey. The queen bee needed a lot of energy to lay eggs. For the queen bee, the best thing was human flesh and blood, which could provide a lot of energy. The only thing that belonged to human flesh and blood was nectar. Those worker bees often accumulated a lot of nectar in the pool in the nest. The bloody pool that the explorers saw was actually the nectar that had been deposited for a long time. What the two foreigners provided was nectar. This nectar was obtained from the stomachs of poisonous bees. There was a small amount of it, but it was much sweeter than normal honey. Chapter 521. Xiao Qing made honey chicken drumsticks and chicken wings. Because the two men provided some raw materials, Xiao Qing let them eat together. Xiao Qing's culinary skills instantly conquered the two foreigners. They ate until their eyes were brimming with tears. They had probably not eaten such good food since the apocalypse. Furthermore, the culinary skills of the Chinese people, which had been accumulated for 5,000 years, was not something that the United States could compare with. The two foreigners' expressions were probably very eager to hug Xiao Qing's thighs and beg her to take them away. What were people born for? Wasn't it just to eat well, wear warm clothes, and satisfy their little needs? In this post-apocalyptic world, let's not talk about clothes first, at least they could eat well if they followed Xiao Qing. Unfortunately, Xiao Qing was not going to accept the two foreigners as her followers. She left after finishing her business. She couldn't just leave them here and take them back. Not to mention whether they would agree or not, the language barrier was a big problem. So in order to avoid all the trouble, it was best not to accept them. 2 days later, they finally arrived at the Chinatown survivor base. The Chinatown survivor base was not located in the original Chinatown, but because the whole base was almost all Chinese, and 80% of them came from Chinatown, they were lazy and named the base Chinatown Survivor Base. And it had been used until now, so it was estimated that the name was useless. The gate of the Chinatown Survivor Base was very strict. If you wanted to enter the base, you had to go through a lot of checks because the poisonous bees carried the zombie virus. As long as you were stung, there was a great chance that you would become a zombie. They had suffered like this before, so they were extra cautious. All ordinary people who wanted to enter the base had to go through several times more complicated checks than before. Xiaoqing and the others arrived at the gate, and the two foreigners immediately said that they knew someone who could simplify the check procedures. Xiaoqing smiled and said, "Leave it to us, we don't need to bother you." One of the two clerks immediately stepped forward and said to the guard, "Please inform your base chief that his guest has arrived." Although they came here openly, they still had to guard against the leaders of Country M. It was better to wait until this matter was settled before revealing their identities to Country M. The gatekeeper was stunned for a moment. In the end, he didn't act like a snob like in some novels and went in to report. The base chief of the Chinatown Survivor base coincidentally had the surname Tang. When he heard that someone had come to the door and said that it was a guest he had invited, he was stunned. His first reaction was that someone was being pretentious. After thinking about it carefully, he remembered that he had contacted the Chinese government not long ago. He immediately jumped up and said to the person who came to report, "Go and call the deputy base commander and several regiment commanders over." Then, he hurriedly went to change his clothes. At the very least, he had to look more dignified so that others wouldn't think that he was looking down on the emissary from the Celestial Empire. He was one of the people who wanted to return to China. Probably because he was getting older, he always wanted to return to his roots. Even if he died, he was willing to die in the land that he dreamed of. Therefore, he was so cautious about the people from the Celestial Empire. Even if the other party might not be from the Celestial Empire, he had to see first. The base chief rushed to the gate with people and saw Xiaoqing and the others who were unfamiliar faces. At this moment, he knew that these people were likely to be from the Celestial Empire. Chapter 522. First of all, they were all people from the Celestial Empire. He didn't know all the people from the Celestial Empire in Country M, but at least he had seen them before. Even if he couldn't recognize them, he was always familiar with them. But he was sure that he hadn't seen these people before. Then they were likely to be from the Celestial Empire. As soon as the base chief came over, one of the two civilian staff greeted him and shook his hand very kindly. "Are you the base chief of the Chinatown Survivor base?" "We are from our hometown." When he said that, the base chief understood and quickly said, "Let's go in and talk. It's not a good idea to stand here. If people see us, they will say that I'm not treating the guests well." The group of people went in happily. Xiaoqing walked behind them and carefully looked at the senior executives of the Chinatown Survivor base. She felt that everyone wanted to go back to the Celestial Empire. After all, they already had a certain foundation in Country M. The huge Chinatown Survivor base was one of the 3 largest bases in Country M. Ordinary people couldn't give up such a foundation. Even if Tang Yaozu could do it, what about the others? Deputy base chiefs and other senior executives, could they give up just like that? Even if they said they could, Xiaoqing wouldn't believe it. Who were they kidding? Since ancient times, there were only 3 things that attracted men the most: power, fame, and beauty. If they stayed in the Chinatown Survivor base, these 3 things were easily available. When they returned to the Celestial Empire, everything had to start from scratch. As long as they had some utilitarian thoughts, they would know how to choose. Xiaoqing didn't like to speculate about people's evil intentions, but the fact was like this. If Tang Yaozu wanted to take people back, there must be some people who were willing to go back with him, and there must be some people who didn't want to go back. This was certain. It depended on what kind of thoughts they had. As long as it had nothing to do with Xiaoqing and they didn't hinder her, she was still very easy to talk to. Tang Yaozu took them to the living room of the main building and brewed tea. After everyone sat down, Tang Yaozu said excitedly, "I have been waiting for you for a long time." The matter of communicating with Tang Yaozu was naturally handed over to the 2 civilian staff. The role of the two of them was diplomacy. Also, the two of them were more reliable when it came to negotiations. As for other aspects, forget about them. At the very least, Tang Yaozu was smiling the entire time. In the end, it was decided that Tang Yaozu and the rest would return to China. Some of them would leave, while some would stay. Tang Yaozu still needed some time to arrange things after his departure, such as who to hand over the entire base to. Moreover, with so many people leaving, the strength of the base would definitely decrease. If the mutated animals attacked the survivor base again, their defensive strength would definitely decrease. Maybe the base would be destroyed and the people would die. These things had to be explained in advance. They couldn't leave a mess for the next base chief. It just so happened that Xiao Qing and the others also needed time to complete other tasks, so the matter here was temporarily put aside. However, under the hospitality of the base chief, they decided to stay in the base for a day or two and replenish their stock of vegetables and fruits before leaving. In the Chinatown survivor base, there were many vegetable, fruit, and crop farms. Many ordinary people worked there to earn their daily food. Therefore, even if the Chinatown survivor base was besieged by zombies and other difficulties, they could be self-sufficient for a long time. This model was very good and would be very suitable for the current China. The only problem was that most of the bases were now inside the city. The land inside the city was relatively small, so it was difficult to achieve self-sufficiency. Chapter 523. Most of the survivors lived in the city and opened up a safe farm point around the city. However, once the city was besieged by zombies, the situation was not as good as the Chinatown survivor base. Of course, all of this had nothing to do with Xiao Qing. Most of the people in Hejiang City were zombies, and only a small part of them were humans. They could live a self-sufficient life by opening up a small vegetable farm at the entrance. Thinking about it this way, there were advantages to becoming a zombie. They didn't have to worry about making a living, and they never had to worry about starving to death or being eaten by zombies. Thinking about it this way, it was great. They lived in the Chinatown survivor base, and all they did every day was eat, sleep, and walk. It was very leisurely. Especially Xiao Qing, those who knew her didn't dare to get close to her. Except for two foreigners, no one dared to come to her every day to eat and drink. As for Dai, he still ate and slept every day. He was either cultivating or sleeping. Xiao Qing was very worried. Dai should be about to level up. Every time he acted abnormally, it meant that he was about to level up. He had been at the peak of level 4 for a long time. This kind of advancement, others couldn't help him. The only thing Xiao Qing could do was take out all the high-level crystal nuclei. She didn't have many crystal nuclei suitable for Dai. She left a lot of crystal nuclei in Jiang City for Gu Panpan and the others to cultivate. She didn't go out to hunt zombies during this period, so she didn't have many crystal nuclei. After the two of them used a lot these days, there weren't many crystal nuclei left. Dai was sleeping more and more. Xiao Qing was very worried. She checked Dai's body and found that his body couldn't bear the rapid absorption of energy. That was why he fell asleep. In the sleeping state, energy would be digested faster than usual. This was a good thing for Dai. However, the lack of crystal nuclei was still a problem. Xiao Qing had a terrible headache, so she called Qin Zishi. I'm going out to get some crystal nuclei. Can you help me guard Dai? You know the second King Yanluo situation. I don't trust anyone else. Qin Zishi actually wanted to go out with them, but since Xiao Qing said so, he had to stay. Okay, Sister Qing. Be careful outside. Xiao Qing nodded and walked out. When she walked out, Zhu Machin happened to be sitting on the doorstep, wiping his knife. When he heard that Xiao Qing was going out, he followed her. Let's go together. I'm bored anyway. One more person meant one more strength. Zhu Machin wasn't a weakling, so Xiao Qing agreed. The two foreigners wanted to follow her, but Xiao Qing didn't let them. They were basically two ability users without any abilities. If they were weak, what was the point of following them? What a burden. After leading Zhu Machin out, Xiao Qing met another person. This person was also standing among the higher-ups of the Chinatown survivor base that day. He must be one of the higher-ups of the Chinatown survivor base. He looked similar to Tang Yaozu, but he was young. He was only in his 20s. He was probably Tang Yaozu's relative, and he might even be his son. Even if he wasn't his son, he should be a close relative. Tang Yaozu looked kind and generous, but this young man's eyes had a hint of harshness. Xiao Qing didn't like him at first glance. As soon as Xiao Qing brought Zhu Machin out, she was stopped by the smiling man. I met this young miss yesterday. I'm Tang Tianda. My father is Tang Yaozu. Young miss, you're the young miss. Your whole family is young miss. And you're so good at biting words. Who do you think you are? Xiao Qing mocked him expressionlessly. However, he was Tang Yaozu's son. She had to give him some face. I'm Xiao Qing. This is my friend, Zhu Machin. Xiao Qing gave a simple introduction and prepared to leave. She still had things to do. How could she have time to chat with this playboy? Young Miss Xiao, please wait. Where are you planning to go? Could it be that you want to walk around the Chinatown survivor base? I'm the host. You should be looking for me for this kind of thing. Tang Tianda said with a smile. Although he was smiling, his smile was very annoying. At least, Xiao Qing hated him. This was because Tang Tianda looked like a lecher. I just want to go out and hunt zombies. Xiao Qing also said with a smile. Host, do you want to go together? Tang Tianda's expression immediately changed. She was such a beautiful woman. Why did she have such unique hobbies? Wasn't it good to go out and eat, drink, and chat? Not to hunt zombies. Chapter 524. This beautiful woman looked at Tang Tianda with an expression that said, do you dare or not? If you don't dare, I'll leave first. Tang Tianda was immediately enraged. Isn't it just hunting zombies? I'll take you there. Xiao Qing smiled and agreed, okay. She originally wanted to find someone to take her, but she didn't expect someone to deliver himself to her door. This was just right. Tang Tianda took two of his subordinates, plus Xiao Qing and Zhu Machin, and left the door in a mighty manner. North of the Chinatown survivor base was the original Chinatown site. Because the original Chinatown was occupied by zombies, they had to retreat to the current city and build a new Chinatown survivor base. This was the closest to the Chinatown survivor base, and the place with the highest number of zombies. The enraged Tang Tianda very strongly wanted Xiao Qing to see his ability, but after arriving at the old Chinatown site, he somewhat regretted. Although he had two bodyguards with him, he didn't dare to guarantee that he could safely leave the old Chinatown site. After all, there were too many zombies inside. But he had already arrived at the place, and Xiao Qing was looking at him with a smile behind him. If he retreated at this time, he would really lose all his face. Tang Tianda encouraged himself and summoned up the courage to say, this is the old Chinatown site. There are a lot of zombies inside. If we want to hunt zombies, let's come here. Okay. Xiao Qing carried the military knife and took the lead to step in. She stretched her neck and breathed a sigh of relief. It had been a long time since she came out to hunt zombies. Thinking about it, she still missed it. Machin, I'll be your support. Xiao Qing said lazily. Zhu Machen's ability's damage was particularly high, and her damage was also high, but her ability to control was even higher. Rather than splitting up and hunting everywhere, it was better to cooperate. Zhu Machen nodded and said, "I'll leave it to you." What he meant was that the safety of the two of them would be handed over to Xiao Qing, and he would only be responsible for attacking wildly. Tang Tiande was not satisfied. From the beginning, he wanted to chase after Xiao Qing. After all, he had not seen such a good girl like Xiao Qing for a long time. Although the girls in Country M had long legs and good figures, their skin was still lacking compared to the girls in China. Especially after the apocalypse, it was rare to see such a beautiful woman like Xiao Qing. It was no wonder that Tang Tiande's heart was itching. It could only be said that her beauty was alluring. However, he came to such a dangerous place like the old site of Chinatown for Xiao Qing, but Xiao Qing didn't even spare him a glance. Tang Tiande took a step forward and said, "You probably don't know, but this was the original Chinatown of J City. It was the largest Chinatown in the entire Country M, with a population of more than 30,000. After the apocalypse, more than half of the people became zombies, and some were later infected. That is to say, there are at least 20,000 zombies here. You should follow behind me, otherwise what will you do if you encounter danger?" When he said this, he looked affectionately at Xiao Qing, a delicate and cute woman like you should hide behind a man and enjoy life. Why come out and take risks? Is it because your boyfriend doesn't treat you well? Why don't you follow me? I will definitely treat you well. He was still very confident. What kind of woman could maintain such a beautiful appearance after the apocalypse? Either she was very strong, or she was kept as a mistress. Xiao Qing was most likely the latter. She was kept as a mistress, so why couldn't he? No matter what, he was still the son of the head of the Chinatown survivor base. Before the apocalypse, he was a proper second-generation rich, and the top kind. He was young and had a family background. Liking Xiao Qing was her fortune. Chapter 525. Xiao Qing laughed. She looked Tang Tiande up and down. Tang Tiande's appearance could only be considered average. Seriously speaking, he wasn't ugly or good-looking. His facial features were cold and gloomy, making it hard for people to have a good impression of him. Moreover, this person was very confident. Having confidence wasn't a bad thing, but having too much confidence was arrogance. Xiao Qing's gaze was too blatant, and there was even a hint of mockery in it. This mockery completely infuriated Tang Tiande. He looked around and found that there was no one around. Not everyone had the leisure to come to such a dangerous place. He looked at Zhu Machen again. Zhu Machen probably had some strength, but what use was that? Even in his territory, a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Moreover, he didn't think that Zhu Machen could be considered a dragon. Tang Tiande said to Zhu Machen with his nose in the air, "Esteemed guest from the Heavenly Empire, please don't interfere with what I'm about to do. Otherwise, what does it matter if you're an esteemed guest from the Heavenly Empire? This is my territory, and I have 100 ways to make you disappear without a trace." Zhu Machen couldn't help but grin. He really admired Tang Tiande's courage. He was very clear about Xiao Qing's strength and immediately stood to the side to watch a good show. Tang Tiande was very satisfied with his self-awareness and walked towards Xiao Qing. "Isn't it good to follow me? You can eat and drink well, and you don't need to come out and suffer. I'm willing to raise you and love you. You just need to be a delicate flower in my hands." Xiao Qing felt a bit disgusted. What the hell was a delicate flower? She had never thought that someone like her could be associated with the word delicate. She was more like a man-eating flower. For example, a big flower. Aside from feeling disgusted, she also wanted to laugh. If she stood in the capital and said that she wanted to find a man, she would probably scare a bunch of people away. But this Tang Tianda had actually delivered himself to her door. It was very interesting. What did you just say you wanted to do with me in your hands? Xiao Qing asked with a smile. Naturally, it's to be the love of my heart. Tang Tianda thought that he was about to succeed. He squinted his eyes and smiled. I'll give you whatever you want. I want you to stay away from me. Xiao Qing suddenly thought of this lame joke. The moment she said this, Tang Tianda's expression changed. If he still hadn't realized that he had been tricked, then he shouldn't be called Tang Tianda anymore. He should be called Second Fool Tang. Tang Tianda said with a cold face, What do you mean, you're not willing to agree to my request? Let me ask you, where did you get such good self-awareness? Xiao Qing looked him up and down sarcastically. He was arrogant, ugly, and didn't have much ability. How could he be so arrogant? Because I can make you wish you were dead. You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Tang Tianda sneered and said to the two bodyguards beside him, You two go, take him down for me. When I'm satisfied, maybe I'll let you two have a good time. I'll let you have a good time. Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes and raised her hand. Zhu Machin silently covered his eyes. He couldn't bear to watch. How fierce and awesome was Xiao Qing. Back then, she was so angry for Lan Yan that she almost massacred the capital. How could Tang Tianda provoke her? Zhu Machin sighed and said that he couldn't bear to watch. At the same time, he opened a big gap between his fingers. He wasn't sincere at all. It was obvious that he wanted to see a joke. Tang Tianda was very confident in himself. The two paranormals beside him were both level 4 paranormals. In a small base, they would be at the level of a base leader. Even in a large base, they would be able to take on the role of a commander. Chapter 526. Dealing with a weak woman like Xiao Qing, wouldn't it be more than enough? The two metahumans were actually unwilling. After all, two people dealing with a weak woman was actually a very shameful thing. However, Tang Tianda had their salaries in his hands, and the two of them were not good people either. He immediately said, Don't worry, it's a piece of cake. Then, the two of them rushed over. They obviously did not put Xiao Qing in their eyes, one more arrogant than the other. One of them was a strengthening type metahuman. He immediately activated his ability and reached out to grab Xiao Qing's shoulder. Xiao Qing raised her hand, and vines drilled out from the ground. They effortlessly tied up the two of them. The moment the vines touched the skin of the two people, the sharp thorns pierced their skin and injected the poison. The moment their skin was pierced, they could no longer use their abilities. The two of them were like two dead pigs, hanging in the air by the vines. It had to be said that Xiao Qing's vines had evolved a little after subduing Little Red. Its thorns had started to suck blood. Although it was not as good as Little Red, it was still very easy to suck two people dry. However, Xiao Qing did not directly kill the two of them. She kept them alive because she still had a use for them. Tang Tianda was stunned on the spot. He also thought that Xiao Qing would struggle, and he also thought that there would be a fight. He also thought that there would be a stalemate, but he did not expect that Xiao Qing would directly kill the two of them. It was an instant kill. The two of them had just activated their abilities, and in the blink of an eye, they were already hung up. If this was not an instant kill, then what was? Xiao Qing hooked her finger, and immediately, a vine dragged Tang Tianda over. A level 3 metahuman, Xiao Qing did not even put him in her eyes. Saying that he was an instant kill was already praising him. What do you want to do? Tang Tian asked. Xiao Qing said lazily, "What do you think I want to do?" Tang Tianda swallowed his saliva and said, "I'm the son of the chief of the Chinatown survivor base. If you touch me, you'll die too. My father will not let you off." Xiao Qing chuckled and said, "Doesn't it sound like what the villain on TV says before he dies?" Zhu Mochin nodded with a serious expression. "Yes." Tang Tianda's face was filled with despair as he struggled, "You can't kill me. Otherwise, you, the man in your tent, and the one beside you will all die. You can't bear my father's revenge. Let me go and I can pretend that nothing happened. What happened today was my fault. I apologize to you." Xiao Qing smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you." Tang Tianda thought that Xiao Qing was convinced and breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he said, "I will never tell anyone about what happened today. I was blinded by greed. Miss Xiao, please forgive me." Although he said that, his lowered eyes were full of viciousness. Now that his life was in Xiao Qing's hands, he naturally did not dare to say anything. When he was rescued and returned to the Chinatown survivor base, he could do whatever he wanted with revenge. As a man, of course, he had to be flexible. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. He kept comforting himself, and then fantasized about how he would catch Xiao Qing after returning to the Chinatown survivor base. He would torture Xiao Qing, rape her, then kill her, and so on. Then, he was lifted up by Xiao Qing. He was shocked. "Didn't you say you wouldn't kill me?" "Yeah, I didn't say I was going to kill you." Xiao Qing lazily used vines to lift the three people and took Zhu Mochin deeper inside. She disliked the three people for being noisy, so she used vines to block their mouths. After taking Zhu Mochin to a location near the city center, Xiao Qing said, "Are we going to do it here?" Zhu Mochin nodded. "Let's do it here." He already vaguely knew what Xiao Qing was going to do. He couldn't help but sigh. Xiao Qing was really skilled and daring. "We'll split the crystal cores 40 to 60. I'll take 60. You don't have any objections, right?" Xiao Qing said. Zhu Mochin agreed. Even if he took 40, he would definitely take advantage. He had seen the speed at which Xiao Qing killed zombies. He had stayed here for a day, but the number of zombies he killed was probably less than the number of zombies he killed in an hour with Xiao Qing. "Then let's start." Xiao Qing raised her hand. First, she released Guang Guang to protect the two of them. Then, she also released Xiao Hong. Xiao Hong was entrenched on Guang Guang's body. A gorgeous flower bloomed, and it looked a little arrogant. Then, Xiao Qing hung up the three people tied up by vines. Using the military knife in her hand, she cut open their thighs. Fresh blood suddenly flowed out. The three people who didn't know what she was going to do turned pale. Soon, they knew what Xiao Qing was going to do, because the zombies who smelled the blood had already rushed over like flies. Chapter 527. This was a very good bait, and it saved them the trouble of looking for zombies. Xiao Qing lifted the three of them up high, so high that the zombies couldn't bite them. Moreover, the wounds on their legs weren't big, so they could bleed for a long time without dying. After the zombies that smelled the blood rushed over, Xiao Qing began to move. She stretched out her hand, and countless vines came out of the ground as if they were alive. Any zombies that came close were all tied up by the vines. Xiao Qing didn't use a lot of strength, so it only took a few seconds for the zombies to break free. However, there was still Zhu Mochin at the side. After Xiao Qing controlled the zombies, Zhu Mochin made his move. He dug into his pocket and took out a few black pellets from his fingertips. He said to Xiao Qing, "Can you gather them into a pile?" Xiao Qing nodded, and the vines gathered together, dragging the zombies together. At this time, Zhu Machin jumped up, and the pellets flew out from his fingertips and landed in the pile of zombies. In the next second, the pellets that flew out from his fingertips all exploded. It was like a few bags of explosives, exploding into the crowd of zombies. Other than a few lucky zombies, the rest of the zombies were blown into pieces. Xiaoqing released Dehua, and Dehua took Xiao Hong and happily began to clean up the battlefield. Xiao Hong was responsible for extending its tentacles and gathering the zombies' corpses together, while Dehua was responsible for eating. After eating, it would obediently spit out the crystal nuclei. This was because Dehua knew that if it didn't spit them out, it would be torn apart by Xiaoqing to be squeezed into juice. As a flower that knew how to adapt to circumstances, it was still quite smart. It secretly ate 2 crystal nuclei without being discovered, so it just had to spit out the majority of them. Soon, there was a small mountain of crystal nuclei next to Dehua. Then, the zombies smelled the blood and continuously rushed over. They were continuously killed by Xiaoqing and Zhu Machin. The crystal nuclei next to Dehua piled up more and more. Not to mention Zhu Machin, who knew Xiaoqing better, even Tang Tianda and the others who were in danger were dumbfounded. They now knew what kind of killing god they had provoked. Perhaps Xiaoqing alone could slaughter the current Chinatown survivor base. Tang Tianda's face was completely pale, because he knew very well that even if he returned to his own territory, he wouldn't be able to kill Xiaoqing. Right now, he could only hope that Xiaoqing would remember her promise and spare his life. Otherwise, even if Xiaoqing killed him, his death would be in vain. No one would have the ability to avenge him. As the saying goes, if you often walk by the river, how can your shoes not get wet? The first time his shoes got wet, he met a peerless iron plate like Xiaoqing. Other than his bad character, there was no other explanation. Xiaoqing was multitasking. While controlling the vines to capture zombies, she sat next to Dehua and began to count the crystal nuclei. She divided the crystal nuclei into 2 piles. A small pile for Zhu Machin and a large pile for her. She really was the kind of person who could use them for a few months after coming out to hunt. After about an hour, the pile of crystal nuclei was enough to drown Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing stretched and said, "How about we stop here for today? I think there's quite a lot." Zhu Machin was still in a state of shock. He had lived for so many years, but he had never felt like today that zombies were so easy to kill. They were simply a pile of wooden people. They could be killed at will, and they didn't even fight back. He just had to stand aside and throw metal balls. So when Xiaoqing called him, he was still in a state of shock, so he just nodded foolishly. Chapter 528. Xiaoqing handed the small pile to Zhu Machin, then said, "This is your share. You can count them yourself." "I don't need to count," Zhu Machin said honestly. "There's too many of them. You can help me keep them. I don't have any storage space. You can give them to me when we return to the country." Xiaoqing thought for a moment, then said, "Okay." Zhu Machin picked up a few high-leveled crystal cores for his daily use. The rest were all given to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing was just about to put away Dehua and the others and leave when she suddenly heard an angry scream. She stopped in her tracks. In any case, not far away, several black dots were jumping all the way from the rooftops and rushing over. When she got closer, she discovered that these dots were all zombies. Moreover, they were all at least level 4. There were even level 5 zombie kings. Moreover, there were 3 level 5 zombie kings. Xiaoqing more or less understood. There was always a boss among the zombies in every place. She had killed so many of their subordinates, so the boss had come looking for her. Tang Tianda's already pale face became even paler. He said dejectedly, "Big sister, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. You have to listen to me on this. These zombies are all very high-leveled. We can't beat them. Can you put me down and let's run together? Xiaoqing ignored him. She just stretched her body, then sighed and said, there aren't any level 6 zombies. If there were a few level 6 zombies, she could get a few level 6 zombie crystal cores. She might be able to break through to level 7 today. A few level 4 and level 5 zombies, to put it bluntly, she really didn't care about them. Maybe there really are level 6 zombies. After all, this is such a big Chinatown. Zhu Machin frowned and said, maybe they're watching us from the shadows. Xiaoqing rubbed her chin, then said, do you want to practice? If you don't want to practice, then leave it to me. I'm worried that Air Dai will be worried when she wakes up and doesn't see me. I'll leave it to you, Zhu Machin said self-deprecatingly. I'll hold the line. Xiaoqing nodded and slowly stretched her waist. Then, she directly launched her attack. Although Tang Tianda and the others had seen Xiaoqing's control ability before, they did not directly face her strength. They did not have any concept of her strength until now. Xiaoqing directly rushed towards those zombies. At the same time, vines drilled out from her back, completely covering her body. By the time Tang Tianda and the others saw Xiaoqing again, she was already in the middle of the zombie horde. She was grabbing a zombie's head with each hand and twisting it easily, twisting it off. Then, the two heads were casually thrown away by Xiaoqing as if she was throwing away garbage. The eyebrows of the people watching twitched. Xiaoqing calmly shuttled through the zombie horde. Those who tried to ambush her were all blocked by the vines. The vines did not kill them. They only acted as a shield, protecting Xiaoqing as she swept through the zombie horde. It had been a long time since she had personally fought. After all, just the vines were enough to deal with most of her enemies. She was too strong, and there were no opponents who could force her to go all out. This time, she just wanted to stretch her body a little, that's all. The zombies' levels were too low for her. Killing them was not a challenge at all. It was a one-sided slaughter. After Xiaoqing stretched her body a little, she prepared to directly deal with them. After all, the world was big, and going back to cook for Air Dai was the most important thing. Just as Xiaoqing was about to go all out, she suddenly heard the sound of wind behind her. Xiaoqing immediately lowered her body. Then, Little Red made its move. Its tentacles quickly wrapped around the attacker, making it look like a dumpling. Then, all of its tentacles tried to dig into the attacker's skin. It tried to take root and absorb the attacker's blood. However, before it could pierce through, the ambusher let out a sharp cry. This cry was very unpleasant to the ears, and it made people dizzy. Even Little Red could not help but loosen its tentacles. In the end, the ambusher escaped. The attacker was a young man. He looked like he was only 17 or 18 years old. He had a hunched back, and sharp teeth like wolf teeth protruded from his mouth. He was a zombie, but his clothes were very clean. There was no dirt on the surface of his body. He was dry and quiet, just like a living person. However, he was still a zombie, and a very strong one. He was at least level 6. Xiaoqing's eyes were cold, but there was a kind of bloodthirsty impulse in her heart. She had not used all of her strength in a fight for a long time. Maybe this time, she could be willful for once. She clenched her fists. The vines immediately wrapped around the surrounding level 4 and 5 zombies like snakes, and directly strangled them to death. In the end, only the young zombie was left. The young zombie stared at Xiaoqing. His eyes were full of bloodthirst. He tightened his body and bent his waist, as if he was ready to attack. Xiaoqing put away the vines and even gave up the dagger. Only her long nails slowly stretched out. The sharp nails were like the young zombie's fangs, shining with cold light. The young zombie was the first to launch an attack. He roared and rushed toward Xiaoqing. The sharp nails pierced toward Xiaoqing's neck. Xiaoqing immediately tangled with him. The feeling of fists hitting flesh was very comfortable. Even in normal days, she often practiced with Yan Hanqing, the kind of pure hand-to-hand combat. However, there were a lot of restrictions when practicing with Yan Hanqing. After all, they were on the same side. She could not use her killing skills. It was not comfortable at all. Again. Xiaoqing grabbed the young zombie's neck and threw him to the ground. The young zombie roared powerlessly and stretched out his hand to scratch Xiaoqing. Then, he was thrown aside by Xiaoqing. The young zombie immediately rushed over again. In a few minutes, Xiaoqing threw him to the ground again. Although he was also a level 6 zombie, after all, he was much weaker than Xiaoqing. Even if Xiaoqing did not use her superpower, he was no match for Xiaoqing. Tang Tiande and the others were stunned. They had never seen anyone who could fight with a zombie bare-chested. No, it was a one-sided beating. This zombie was a level 6 zombie king. Level 6. It could form a zombie tide and destroy a large base. Also, Xiaoqing was a wood superpower user. A level 6 zombie king was being beaten by Xiaoqing like a child. This was too unreal. Tang Tiande could not help but ask Zhu Mochin, is she really a human? Is she really not a level 7 zombie in disguise? Chapter 529. The young zombie had been dominating the old site of Chinatown for a long time. He had never been bullied like this before. He felt wronged and angry at that time. He bared his teeth and rushed up again and again like a beast. Again and again, he was beaten to the ground by Xiaoqing. He looked particularly pitiful. Every time he got up, he was particularly tenacious. His clothes were tattered. Xiaoqing looked at the time. According to the usual practice, Dai should be waking up at this time. She must go back first. At least, she had to get home before Dai woke up. Otherwise, if Dai couldn't see her, it would definitely turn the sky upside down. Therefore, Xiaoqing was ready to end this quickly. She wanted to take this level 6 nucleus home and appease her little Dai. While they were still in the Chinatown survivor base, which was a relatively safe place, she quickly upgraded the Dai. Otherwise, if the Dai suddenly upgraded halfway after leaving the Chinatown survivor base, the two of them might have to have sex in the wild. It was too shameful to use the sky as a blanket and the ground as a bed. Quickly stopping her shameless thoughts, Xiaoqing coughed, raised her hand, and prepared to kill the zombie. But sometimes, especially when people were unlucky, it was easy to do things with twists and turns, such as now. Xiaoqing was just about to end everything in front of her and leave with the harvest when someone wanted to interfere. Stop! An anxious and frightened female voice rang out. Following her voice was a dagger that flew over. Xiaoqing frowned. She held the weak dagger in her palm and looked at the person. The person who ran over was a woman. She looked young, in her 20s. Her ability was not strong, at most level 3. But how could a woman with only level 3 ability survive in a place with so many zombies? After the woman ran over, she immediately hugged the young zombie lying on the ground, pressed his head, and then looked at Xiaoqing in horror. Please let him go. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything. The rebellious young zombie was pressed in the arms of the girl. Although he still bared his teeth and looked unconvinced, he carefully put away his nails for fear of hurting the girl. Xiaoqing was stunned. Except for her own friends, she had never seen people and zombies get along so peacefully. Xiaoqing was stunned for a long time, and then asked, "You raised him?" The girl hesitated for a moment, and then nodded. Today, the young zombie, who was very gentle and let her comb his hair, suddenly ran out crazily. She was only a level 3 paranormal, and her ability was useless. She couldn't keep up with the young zombie at all. When she caught up, she saw Xiaoqing about to kill the young zombie. She was scared out of her wits. With the young zombie's strength, it was very safe in the Chinatown survivor base. There was no one and no zombies that could be his opponent. She didn't expect that Xiaoqing would suddenly appear. The girl was desperate. She only thought that today was definitely over. After all, who would let go of a level 6 zombie and a person who raised zombies? He was my junior. He chased me for a long time. Later, when the apocalypse happened, we happened to be in school. He came to find me and took me away from the school full of zombies. He has always been protecting me. Otherwise, with my weakness, I would have become a zombie's food. Later, in order to protect me, he attracted zombies. I hid in the car and watched him being surrounded by zombies. Only then did I realize that I had fallen in love with him. The girl's tears slowly overflowed. At that moment, I awakened my ability. I thought I could save him, but I found out that my awakened ability was very weak. Zombies wouldn't hurt me, they would treat me as one of their kind. I went back to the zombie group and brought him out. But no matter how hard I tried, he became a zombie. Later, he begged me, "Ah Yun, kill me. I don't want to become a zombie, I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to eat people." But how could I bear to do that? This is my lover. I would rather he become a monster, I would rather he never remember me, than kill him. Chapter 530. I taught him to wash his hands, brush his teeth, and change his clothes. After a long time, he no longer rejected me. He began to get close to me, protect me, and rely on me like a child. I am already very satisfied. These times were all stolen. A person like me is selfish and cold. I should have died long ago. I only ask you one thing. Kill me first. I don't want to see him die in front of me. When love became an obsession, women at this time were the most terrifying, but also the most respectable. Xiaoqing could almost imagine the girl's despair. She could also imagine how she struggled to survive in this world with her lover who had turned into a zombie. She even envied the two of them. One became a zombie to protect her lover, while the other didn't leave her lover even after he became a zombie. Wasn't this something to be envied by others? Just like Yan Qiue, Dai, and Yan Hanqing. None of them had abandoned her. Xiaoqing squatted down and touched the young zombie's head. Then she smiled and said to the girl, "You are very powerful. He is already at level 6. I think he will be able to return to normal soon." After the girl was shocked, she was pleasantly surprised. Her voice trembled as she said, "He can still recover. Return to normal. Become a normal person." Xiaoqing was facing Tang Tianda and the others, so Tang Tianda and the others couldn't see Xiaoqing's movements. Xiaoqing stretched out her hand, and her fingertips slowly stretched out with a grayish-black fingernail with a sinister smell. "I'm special, but since I can live like a normal person, I believe he can too." The girl was so surprised that she covered her mouth and tears fell down. She was already in despair. She wanted to stay with him for a lifetime. Even if he was a zombie for the rest of his life, it didn't matter. She didn't expect that one day, someone would tell her that her lover had a chance to return to normal. He would smile at her, cry at her, talk to her, and comfort her when she was sad. "Thank you. Thank you." The young girl naturally understood that Xiaoqing wasn't going to kill them. Other than feeling a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, she also felt endless gratitude. She thought they were going to die today. Xiaoqing and the young girl shared their experience of raising zombies. High-level zombies actually have their own thoughts. Even if their thoughts are very simple, like children, at least they have their own likes and dislikes. Chatting with them more, accompanying them more, and guiding them to do something will be beneficial to their recovery. My heir Dai not only knows how to be jealous now, but also knows how to say one or two simple words. Xiaoqing was very proud. When she talked about heir Dai's ability to speak, her tone was as if her own child had won the first place in the grade. The young girl was very envious, but also a little depressed. When can I hear him call my name again? Soon. According to my estimation, zombies should have the ability to express themselves around level 7 or 8. Xiaoqing continued, if you have the ability, you can give him more high-level zombie nuclei to cultivate. It will be faster this way. So that's how it is. The young girl suddenly understood. After we lived here, Mingyi often went out to hunt zombies. There was a level 6 zombie here, but Mingyi was only level 5 at that time. When I wasn't paying attention, he went out to fight it alone. He came back with bruises all over his body. He insisted on giving me a nucleus, but I didn't use it. The young girl took out a nucleus from her sachet and handed it to Xiaoqing. This is for you. Take it as a thank you gift for not hurting Mingyi. You can give it to him. Maybe he can directly rise to level 6. Xiaoqing didn't accept it and said lightly. She always had a faint good impression of this young girl. It was probably because they had a similar fate that made her feel pity for the young girl. This was probably the feeling of sympathizing with each other. Take it. I can feel that Mingyi is slowly recovering. I think you probably need a level 6 nucleus more than me. The young girl smiled. Mingyi is fine. I'm already very satisfied. Xiaoqing hesitated a little, and took the nucleus. She really needed the nucleus. This level 6 nucleus was enough for heir Dai to rise to level 6. She especially hoped that after heir Dai rose to level 6, he would be able to call out her name fluently. If there is a chance, I will compensate you. Xiaoqing said lightly. The young girl just smiled, and then held the young zombie's hand. The young zombie's throat kept making impatient sounds, but he obediently let the young girl hold him. He could probably feel the fear and lingering fear in the young girl's heart. He would secretly use his palm to touch the young girl's hair to comfort her. Xiaoqing couldn't help but smile because of the warm atmosphere. She asked the young girl, have you ever thought of leaving? Go back to the Celestial Empire. I have built a city in the Celestial Empire called Jiang City. There are all my kind there. The young girl was moved for a moment, but she shook her head in the end. Actually, I really want to go back to my hometown. But forget it. I have built our home here. After staying here for a long time, I don't want to change places. If Mingyi recovers, maybe we will go back. At that time, we will look for you. Okay. Xiaoqing stood up, and then said, the door of Jiang City will always be open for you. Thank you. The young girl smiled shyly, and then said, my name is Jiang Yun. He is Lan Mingyi. What about you? Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing waved her hand, if fate wills it, we will meet again. Then she turned around and left. Tang Tianda, who didn't hear the whole process, was stunned. A second ago, they were still fighting. How did it end peacefully? Moreover, it was a zombie. Women were really strange creatures. Chapter 531. Xiaoqing left without any reluctance. She was still carrying the 3 living creatures and Zhu Mochin. She looked very relaxed. This was Jiang Yun and Lan Ming's paradise. If the two of them didn't want to be disturbed, she wouldn't rashly disturb them. Xiaoqing knew that the two of them would live very well. When they returned to the survival base in Chinatown, it was already past Dai's usual time to wake up. When Xiaoqing arrived at the gate, she put down the three people and calmly threatened them, "I didn't kill you not because I don't have the ability, but because I'm too lazy to do it. I'm sure the three of you are very clear about this. I'll give you two choices. First, forget everything that happened today and pretend that nothing happened. Second, you don't need to go back." Tang Tianda was really obedient this time. "We only came out to kill zombies today. We didn't encounter many zombies, so we came back. Did anything else happen? Why didn't I know about it?" Xiaoqing's face was full of satisfaction. She let go of the three people and said indifferently, "Slap your own face. Your face is so pale, who are you trying to show it to?" When the three people heard Xiaoqing's words, they immediately slapped their faces. After a while, their faces turned red. They were afraid that Xiaoqing would feed them to the big flower. "Okay, if you keep slapping your face, it's going to swell. Let's go." Xiaoqing calmly led the way. The group of people returned to the survival base in Chinatown. When they returned to the base, she couldn't help but quicken her pace. What if Dai couldn't find her and went crazy? Xiaoqing wasn't worried that Dai would hurt others because of his madness. She was only worried that others would find out that Dai wasn't right and hurt him. The few people behind her couldn't keep up with her speed and were left far behind. Xiaoqing quickly returned to the place where they were temporarily staying. Along the way, she didn't find any panic and was very calm. After opening the door, she realized that Dai had not gone crazy. He was sitting on the sofa, hugging his knees and staring blankly out the window. When he heard the door open, he quickly turned his head. When he saw that it was Xiaoqing, he pounced on her. Xiaoqing's first reaction was to heave a big sigh of relief, and then her heart ached. Dai was too obedient. The more obedient he was, the more sorry Xiaoqing felt. "Have you eaten anything? I left some food in the fridge and left a note at the bedside." Xiaoqing touched Dai's head and said. Dai shook his head slowly, and then plunged into Xiaoqing's arms sadly. When he opened his eyes, he realized that Xiaoqing was gone. He couldn't smell Xiaoqing in the whole house, so he was not in the mood to look at the note. At that moment, he almost went crazy. If it weren't for the fact that he was gradually recovering, he would have rushed out to find Xiaoqing. After forcing himself to calm down, Dai sat on the sofa and didn't go anywhere. He quietly waited for Xiaoqing to come back. He knew that Xiaoqing would never leave him alone. She must have gone out to do something and would be back soon. Dai just waited like that. Time passed little by little, but surprisingly, he didn't get irritated. He was very quiet. Perhaps even the time he waited was warm in his eyes, because the person he was waiting for was Xiaoqing. "Good boy, let's eat first." Xiaoqing opened the fridge and was about to take out the food that she had prepared earlier to heat up. Halfway through, she changed her mind and directly made a new dish. When she was cooking, Dai followed behind her obediently. Wherever she went, Dai followed. He didn't make a fuss, and just watched Xiaoqing quietly. Chapter 532. Sometimes, Xiaoqing would pick up a piece of cooked food and put it in his mouth. The scene was very warm. After the meal was ready, the two sat around the table and ate. After eating, Xiaoqing took out the 6th-rank crystal core from her pocket and gave it to Dumbo. Then she took out a lot of 4th and 5th-rank crystal cores from the space and patted Dumbo's head. "Go and cultivate. Once you break through, I'll take you out to hunt." Dumbo nodded and said, "All right, I'll take you with me." Air Dai took the nuclei and went to cultivate. After he went back to the room, Xiaoqing didn't rest. Xiaoqing sat outside, holding a nucleus and absorbing it. Since she got the red soil, she had broken through to level 6. These days, she had been using the red soil and the high-level nuclei to cultivate. Now, the energy in her body was basically saturated. She only needed an opportunity to break through to the 7th level. At that time, she wouldn't dare to say anything else, but at least among the superpowered people, her strength would definitely be considered as one of the top few. Naturally, the stronger one was, the better. The stronger one was, the safer one's companions would be, and the more capable one would be to protect the people one wanted to protect. The most painful thing in the world was to watch one's companions get hurt or unable to do anything. Especially in this post-apocalyptic world, there were dangers everywhere. Strength was the prerequisite for everything. If one wanted to live a good life, one needed strength. If one wanted to protect one's companions and friends, one needed strength. If one didn't want to be bullied, one still needed strength. Even the most basic right to speak required strength. If one didn't have strength, others wouldn't listen to one's words because it was meaningless. Xiaoqing was thinking about how to become stronger all the time. The road to becoming stronger had no end. Xiaoqing just needed to be one step faster than others. That was enough. They didn't talk for the whole night. Both of them were cultivating and didn't even dare to sleep. Air Dai didn't sleep, and Xiaoqing didn't dare to sleep. She was afraid that Air Dai would suddenly break through, or something would happen during the breakthrough. She didn't have time to react, so she simply didn't sleep. Anyway, for her now, it wasn't a big deal to not sleep for one night. After midnight, when it was almost dawn, there was a strange fluctuation in Air Dai's room. At that moment, Xiaoqing knew that Air Dai had broken through. She quickly went to Air Dai's room, but she didn't intervene. She was more nervous than Air Dai, even though it was Air Dai's breakthrough. Xiaoqing was afraid that Air Dai's breakthrough would cause some problems. After all, it was proven that the higher the level of zombies, the higher their intelligence. What if Dummy awakened his memory when he broke through, or directly forgot the time when he was Dummy? What about that period of time? Xiaoqing wanted to know the situation of Air Dai's breakthrough as soon as possible. Xiaoqing sat cross-legged at the door, staring at Air Dai. Air Dai was at the most critical moment of his breakthrough. Success or failure, it was just a moment. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't nervous. After Xiaoqing released the flower, she calmly pulled it to her side. Then, she grabbed the flower's leaves with one hand and the flower's petals with the other. She used so much strength that the flower kept shaking its head in pain. No matter how smart it was just a flower. It couldn't even make a sound, let alone beg for mercy. Xiaoqing held the flower expressionlessly and ravaged the flower's leaves and petals. She looked calm, but she couldn't control her nervousness and was about to jump up. Just as her heart jumped to her throat, the weird breath on Dumbo's body dispersed. He suddenly opened his eyes, and there was a sharp and deep light in his eyes. As he opened his eyes, a mighty pressure spread out in all directions. The breakthrough was successful. If someone was in the wild, they would find that the mutant animals and zombies near the Chinatown survivor base were crazily running away. They all noticed Air Dai's breakthrough. The breakthrough from level 5 to level 4 was very big. Just like in a zombie group, there might be many level 5 zombies, but there must be only one level 6 zombie. After all, a mountain couldn't have two tigers, unless one was male and the other was female. For zombies, they didn't have the concept of male and female. So in a zombie group, there was usually only one zombie with the highest level. The mutant animals and zombies wandering around were all independent and didn't have a group. So when they felt that a new king was born, they quickly ran away. They ran very fast, as if they were afraid that Erdai would run out and do something to them. At the moment when dummy Erdai broke through, Xiaoqing was also extremely nervous. She suddenly grasped the big flower tightly and directly tore off a petal. Please have a moment of silence for the poor flower. The poor flower was in so much pain that it jumped in place. As soon as Dumbo too broke through, he slowly withdrew his aura. His eyes looked very wise and far-sighted, with a hint of profoundness. He was not at all like the usual Dumbo too. Xiaoqing panicked and couldn't help but shout, Erdai. Erdai, who was originally unfathomable, immediately returned to the way he was before the breakthrough. He happily jumped into Xiaoqing's arms. There was no trace of his previous wisdom, as if everything was just Xiaoqing's illusion. More importantly, his strength increased after the breakthrough, and he couldn't control it for a while, so he directly pushed Xiaoqing down. Xiaoqing's back hit the ground hard. If she wasn't a zombie, she might have broken bones. Xiaoqing angrily pushed Erdai, who was in her arms, and said, "Get up, stop acting like a spoiled child. You're going to break your bones." Erdai innocently got up, squatted aside, and looked at Xiaoqing pitifully. His eyes were too lethal. Xiaoqing, who was originally not angry, suddenly became soft-hearted. She helped Erdai up and said, "It's a good thing that you broke through, but it's not dawn yet. We can still sleep for a while." She pulled Erdai to sleep. She had to tell the truth. When she saw that Erdai didn't return to normal after the breakthrough, she felt a little relieved. Her thoughts were very selfish, and she felt a little guilty. Therefore, she missed the light that flashed in Erdai's eyes when she told Erdai that they could still sleep for a while. Xiaoqing pulled Erdai back to her room. She first put Erdai on the bed, then lazily took it off. After getting into the bed, she said goodnight and closed her eyes. Before falling asleep, Xiaoqing felt a little disappointed. Erdai didn't have that aspect of the breakthrough this time, cough cough. A person should be pure. Why was she disappointed? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.